please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now all the housekeeping motions we did on Monday are still in force. But we have something important to take care of before we get down to our business. And this town meeting is going to be, when we finish it up and finally adjourn, it's going to be very, very sorrowful event for a certain person here. Mr. Keeling, our conservation agent, where is he? Is he not here?
No, he's right there.
John, stand up and be recognized. After 22 years, he has the audacity to retire. And John, may you enjoy retirement as much as I do. That second cup of coffee sitting there at the kitchen table is primo. Okay, if you recall, we said we would take something out of order. So we are going to jump to the three articles related to the police station. I believe it's Articles 20, 32, and 33. So let's start. We'll hear from Mr. Eiler, please, on Ways and Means.
All right. So can we get the presentation up there, please? Excellent. Thank you. All right. Unlike before, I do have a presentation now, but it still doesn't have the fancy graphics, so I apologize. So this article is about the new police station, but I know there's a lot of context involved with this to understand, how does this fit into our debt planning? How does Proposition 2.5 figure in? We've talked about debt exclusions. So a lot of this is going to be the context surrounding the police station so that you can make an informed decision about the police station and thinking about it with other things that may be coming up here. So, is this going to work? Look at that. All right, so looking at past projects that we've done, I'm not going to go through the list here, but as you can see, there's been a fair number that we've done in the last 10 years or so. And if you look at them, you'll see that the costs are in the $8 to $32 million range is the takeaway from this. Now, if we move on to the projects that we're looking at in the immediate short term here, we have the police station and the Fox Hill School. And if you look at the cost of these, the cost to the town is $46 million for the police station and $61 million for Fox Hill. So we're looking at things that are 2 to 3 times as expensive as our past projects. And this is due to construction costs during the pandemic skyrocketing. So these have been on our capital planning chart for a while, and there were prices were put in there that were very consistent with what we were seeing in other towns, and unfortunately, those got blown out of the water when construction prices went up. You'll also see the tax impact of these, because I know a lot of folks are wondering about that. So, so in particular, the police station would mean about $152 tax impact per year for the median household, and the Fox Hill project would be more about $203. We should be aware that these tax increases don't happen instantly. The projects are not charged all up front, so these would be phased in over a number of years. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about the details of the project, but just the police station was built about 127 years ago as the Union School. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of issues with a building that old. And Chief Brown's put together an excellent presentation that enumerates quite a few of those. This has been on the capital plan for a while to happen after DPW buildings, and here it is coming up. So recall that back in September 2022, town meeting approved $150,000 for a feasibility study. There was a great study online at the website for this project. You can read through it all. But the point is that that study rightfully concluded there's a lot of issues here and that building does need to be replaced, and there'll be a presentation on the particulars of that in a little bit. If we go on to the Fox Hill School, which would be the next project that will be teeing up here, it's not as old, constructed in '67, but it's still an old building, and there's a lot of issues related to that, and it's no longer really meeting our educational needs with things happening in hallways for offices and special service spaces not being there, and the modulars are even getting old and not a great solution. So we went through a lot of details of issues with Fox Hill School. When back in January 22, town meeting approved a $1.5 million feasibility study. So why is it so much more expensive than the police station feasibility study? The Mass School Building Authority, or MSBA, has a very prescribed process that requires a lot of detail before funding approval can be gained. So you'll see there's a huge amount of detail involved in the plan up until this point. One notable decision there to help keep costs down was not to combine the Fox Hill and Pine Glen schools, so this is a Fox Hill replacement. An important thing to keep in mind here is that while it's nominally a $100 million project, the MSBA is likely to fund this for $33 million, and there's about $5.5 million of energy incentives that go into this plan. So that's why the cost to the town is more like $61.5. We should also note that while things are looking good for the MSBA right now, there's no guarantee this level of support would be there in the future. So we've invested 2 years into this process. We shouldn't casually throw that away and decide, oh, we'll just do it later, because that $33 million could easily go away or not be available in the future. So let's skip over to Prop 2.5 a little bit, because this is going to be some important background to understand about why Ways and Means has made some of the recommendations that it has. So in particular, Prop 2.5 is designed to basically limit growth of municipal spending, or give the citizens more direct control should that growth be hitting the limit. So in particular, how does it work? So there's this concept of a levy limit. The levy limit is the maximum amount that the town is allowed to raise in its property taxes. And it cannot go over. It's a true limit. So how does it work from year to year then? And that's what this little bar chart from the Mass government is showing here. Each year you have the levy limit base, which is the previous year's levy limit. You get 2.5% automatic increase on that. And then in addition, any new growth in the town, think of new growth as we put up a new office building or you add a deck to your house, that type of thing. In particular, it's not that your property valuation went up. That gets added on. And then if there are any Proposition 2.5 overrides, which we'll talk about in a moment, that would also be added on. And that determines the new levy limit, which will be the base for the next year. Now, in addition to that, there are debt exclusions that the town can vote on, and that is added on top of this as a temporary allowance on top of the levy limit. So there's one more concept here, which is the excess levy capacity. So we said that the levy limit is the maximum amount that the town can tax. Then there's the actual amount the town has taxed, which historically has been significantly below that. In fact, this year it's about 12.9 million below that. That's called the excess levy capacity. That is basically the margin we have where the town can raise taxes without bumping up against Proposition 2.5 and requiring an override if they wish to do that. So let's go on to now how that process works a little bit here. A Prop 2.5 override, what's that? It's a permanent increase to the levy limit. Town meeting has no involvement with that process. It's entirely, it's done by the select board, is required to put it on the ballot, and it requires a majority of the town vote for it to pass. So, historically, a lot of communities have had override votes, but only 41%, there's only a 41% pass rate on this. So it's a pretty risky thing to be depending on. If your operating budget requires an override, there's a less than 50% chance historically that it's actually going to go through. So it's not a position we ever want to be in. We don't want to be wondering, can we fund at the level that the town desires to, and it depends on an override happening. Burlington, in fact, has never attempted to do a Prop 2.5 override. Now, what's the other mechanism where taxes could be a little bit higher than what 2.5 would allow otherwise? Would be the debt exclusion process. And this is something that we will be proposing in a moment. Again, town meeting has nothing to do with putting debt exclusion on the ballot. This requires the select board to put it on the ballot, and then needs to be passed by a majority town vote in order for it to pass. This is an exclusion that allows the town to have a higher levy than the levy limit would otherwise allow, but only for the life of the debt service for the item that the exclusion is for. So it's a temporary increase, albeit that could be for a number of years. So, there we go. So again, most communities in Massachusetts have done debt exclusions. Some of them do it every year. It's a fairly common thing to do. And the pass rate on this is much higher. 90% of debt exclusions in Massachusetts historically have passed. But Burlington hasn't tried to do a debt exclusion for more than 20 years. So for Burlington, it's kind of a new thing, not in anyone's recent memory by any means. So now, I promise this is the wonkiest slide I have here. So one of the things we like to do is model financially what do all these projects mean for the town in terms of the budget and where we might be relative to Proposition 2.5. So there's two simple models here. If we look at the middle column, I'll call it the average growth column. That assumes that the new growth is a little over 1.9%, which is the average for our last 4 years. It assumes our budget growth is the average of the last 4 years also, of 4.85%. And then the question becomes, okay, if we extrapolate this forward in time and keep operating like that, how long does it take to bump into the Prop 2.5 levy limit? And the answer is, even without a debt exclusion for either Fox Hill or the police station projects, it's more than 12 years. So we put that in a pretty comfortable category as far as Prop 2.5 is concerned. But a wise financial person doesn't look at averages. We try to be a little more conservative than that. So we'll look at the right-hand column now and say, okay, let's be a little more conservative. And for new growth, we'll assume a number that's slightly below the lowest 3-year average that we've had since FY10. So in the last 14 years, this is the worst case 3-year average we had, and we subtract a little bit and say, what if we assume only 1.5% growth? We assume our same average budget growth. Now in this case, if we have a debt exclusion for both the Fox Hill and the police station projects, it's still 11 years before we hit that Prop 2.5 levy limit. So we're pretty comfortable with that. What if there were no debt exclusions that passed, but we still decided to do these two projects? Then it would be 6 years when we use up our excess levy capacity. So the conclusions from that are that even in a conservative estimate or a conservative projection, we don't need to do debt exclusions for these two projects to happen. But from a financially responsible point of view, it's very desirable to have those debt exclusions so that we have some headroom in our levy, that if something comes up, we're not going to be bumping up against the levy limit and require Prop 2.5 override. So the debt exclusion is all about pushing off that date where we might need an override to something at least 11 years in the future. The final thing I'll note is that these two projects have, the Fox Hill project is only about 30% more expensive than the police station project. They're both in the same range of costs. So they both have town meeting approved studies. From a financial point of view, they should both be handled the same way. There are various people that for political reasons want to handle them differently for debt exclusions or whatever, but from a financial point of view, there is no reason to do that. So let's get into the recommendations that come from all this from Ways and Means. So the first one is that we should move forward with these projects and not make them dependent on debt exclusion. And that's in fact the path that we're going down. The second thing is to schedule the town meeting votes to bond these projects as they become ready to be bonded. So right now, the police station is ready to get going, and that's why that's up for this town meeting. And then in the September meeting, the Fox Hill project will be ready to go, and we'll be looking for a vote on that. And since these both require bonding, these are 2/3 votes. Then, so that we have that fiscal headroom, we would schedule debt exclusions for the April 25 town election. Again, we don't have to do them immediately because the projects aren't dependent on the debt exclusions, but they're very desirable. I'll point out that the debt exclusion passing or not passing has absolutely nothing to do with what tax increase you would have. That's strictly dependent on whether we do the project or not, and the debt exclusion is not determining whether we do the project or not. And why the town election? It's a natural time for a very town-specific issue. It's a good way to get people who are actively engaged and informed on this issue to be voting on this issue. It's not fundamental that it has to happen then, but that's why that was proposed. So just putting this all together in a timeline for our final slide here. If we look in the left-hand column, the timeline for, there we go. The timeline for the police station is pretty simple. We're voting on the bonding tonight, and then the town election, we'll be voting on the debt exclusion. Timeline for Fox Hill, just a little bit of history. Back in February, the MSBA voted to proceed with this project, or continue with this project, I should say, planning. The point of that is it's essentially a thumbs up that says, yeah, it looks like you guys are going down the right path. If you continue down this path, you're in good shape. We're very likely to fund you. In August, that is when the MSBA will make their formal decision whether to agree to fund us that $30-odd million on the project. Given that we've been going down the path that's been prescribed, it's extremely likely that they would say yes at that time. But the important thing is, before you're asked to vote on this in the September meeting, you will know if the MSBA is putting in their share on this. And then finally, that would, at the same town election, be coming up for the debt exclusion. So this gives a little bit of overall context that will hopefully be helpful in your decision for the police station tonight, so you can think about the big picture on this. Thank you. And I'm going to close this. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. We've jumped into that before we've introduced the articles. So let me do that. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to borrow $46,225,000 for a police station. And then the associated zoning articles, also moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, to see if the town will vote to amend the planned development district known as Grandview Farm, and then to see if the town will vote to rezone that portion that we just removed from the PDD into a limited district, limited business zoning district. Okay, that's what we're voting on. We're going to discuss all of those three together. Well, they all interlap. Why don't we start with worrying about the police station, and then we'll probably move on to the zoning first. So, hold on. Capital budget, please. Who's speaking for capital budget?
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. Capital budget voted in favor, 500.
Thank you. Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Select Board voted 500 in favor.
Thank you. And is someone presenting on? Well, actually, well, Ways and Means we heard from. What your vote was?
Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Our vote was 12-0-0 in favor of this.
At some point, we'll have to hear from the planning board, but why don't we discuss the police station first? So, who's ever making the presentation on it?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Espejo, Select Board. Good evening, everyone. Happy town meeting night, too. I'm here to present Articles 20, 32, and 33 for the police station construction project. Next slide, please. A little background, why is the new station needed? The Union School was built in 1897, and in 1992, we moved our police station operations into the building, and since then, the building has fallen into disrepair. I think everyone's familiar with the deplorable condition of the building. I won't go back into that again. Many of you have toured it and seen it, and along the way, we've learned that to make an effective and appropriate police station, it's probably not a good idea to try and jam it into an old school. So some of the reasons for that were the layout of the buildings were not conducive for police operations. Some of the hallways were too wide, cutting onto potential office space. There were safety and security concerns all around the building. And actually, back in 2010, we had something called the Town Meeting Facilities Inventory Committee. And what they found way back in 2010, that they resolved that the long-term resolution would be for a complete renovation, replacement of this building within 10 years. And that would be for a police-only facility at its location, centrally located. The recommendation by that committee was to get that done by 2020. And as we all know, we're long past that date, and it's long overdue to get this station done, and that's why we're here before you tonight. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Eiler mentioned, back in September 22, you authorized us to start a feasibility study for the tune of $150,000, and we hired Castle Booz Associates out of Foxborough to take on that study. And in that study, they worked with police administration on what's called a program design. And what that program design is basically the plan for what we need. And they learned, the way they did that was they performed a needs assessment for the next 50 to 60 years on what we need for a police station building. That's the expected life of the building, but knowing how things work in the municipal arena and here in Burlington, it's probably going to last for a lot longer than that, and that's okay. They analyzed our current operations day to day. They analyzed the number of calls for service, the type of calls we go on. And they did a staffing study, current needs, future needs, what's appropriate for the town. And the way they figured those numbers out was taking a look at Burlington in general, our population trends, our anticipated population for the next 50, 60 years, and got kind of the full picture of what we're going to need to build an appropriate building for the next 50 to 60 years, or 79, whatever it takes. Next slide, please. The findings of that study and that program design, they found that it was, number one, not economically feasible to renovate the current facility. It is so out of date. Almost every major system had to be upgraded, including the seismic. It's way behind on current building codes, stretch codes, and it would just not be worth it for us to try and renovate. They determined that we needed approximately a 36,500 square foot building to meet our needs. And this would require approximately 2.7 acres of land to fit the facility. And that kind of limited our options from the jump. As we know, we don't have many available parcels around town that are 2.7 acres just waiting to be developed on. Land is very limited. So in the scope of trying to find a spot for the police station, they looked at several options. They looked at 125 Cambridge Street, which is right over here in front of the high school, on the right of Dottie's Way as you come in. But they had a lot of wetlands. Then they looked at 173 Middlesex Turnpike, which is the Vinebrook treatment plant, now closed, which unfortunately is going to be in the floodplain within a year, kind of disqualifying that site. And lastly, they looked at Pine Glen School, but that was quickly disqualified because as a town we decided we're going to move forward with the 4-school elementary model, and Pine Glen would not be available. So in the end, they agreed with the select board and the town building inventory committee that the current site is the best location for our police station. It's central for easy access and quick access to all corners of the town, ease of operations, resident familiarity, everyone knows where it is, and it preserves that campus feel in our town center that we all have grown to love. And they also determined that to fit this new building, that the adjacent parcel would have to be rezoned to fit the building. We'll get to the zoning in a couple of slides. Next slide, please. This, at the direction of the select board, the town administration then went ahead and built a 12-member building committee. This is the same slide I showed you back during the update in January, but for the benefit of our new members, I'll go through it real quick again. And the goal here, what we were trying to do here when we created this committee, is we wanted to make this a true collaborative effort. We think that to get every stakeholder, as many stakeholders involved in the project would make the best project. So what we did was we took 2 members from the select board, town administration, the chief, the deputy chief, 2 members from the planning board, and representatives from zoning bylaw, land use, ways and means, capital budget, and 4 resident members, one of which is Dr. Saffredini, who lives on Briarwood Lane, who is a direct abutter, and his input has been invaluable throughout the process. Next slide, please. Along the way, and going to all the meetings and listening to all the concerns we've had, we've picked up a lot of good feedback, and we'd like to address some of those issues. One of them that always seems to come up is, why is there no concrete plan? Like Mr. Eiler mentioned, the feasibility study for both Fox Hill and Police Station are very different. The police station was $150,000, and Fox Hill is $1.5 million. And as Mr. Eiler accurately mentioned, the MSBA has a lot more stringent process earlier in the process, and that's why it seems very different. I know a lot of people have been following along with both projects. There is a preliminary plan. We do have a conceptual new building on the current lot showing the use of the sculpture park. Another reason why there's no concrete plan is a fully completed set of designs costs roughly 10% of construction costs, and it would not be cost effective or feasible or even possible to do that without your approval for the funding, which we're asking for tonight. And the final design cannot be completed until we actually know what land is available and what land we have to work with for the project. Another concern we've had from everyone is preserving the green space. KBA specializes in public safety buildings, especially police stations, and they are well-versed in preserving the green space around these type of projects, and impacts of the parking and impervious surface. They actually have a landscape architect on site to help ensure we keep as many trees as possible, and they definitely are used to dealing with butter concerns about preserving the green space. There'll be a site survey, and KBA, again, has a history of saving mature trees and conducting workarounds to make sure we preserve as many trees as possible. Next slide, please. Another big question has been saving the Union School and the historic significance of a building built in the 1800s, and that was very important to a lot of people, definitely understandably. I did some research myself on this, and it became eligible for the National Historic Register in 1980. And surprisingly, I learned it was never nominated for the list. And even if we were to try to put it on the register today, they would reject it on principle just because of the aluminum siding, the vinyl siding. I guess apparently they look at the exterior of the building as one of the most main important components of putting it on the register. The building also has asphalt shingles, aluminum clad windows, modern construction materials on the porch, and the interior has also been renovated due to damage. And also since 1992, there have been no objections to any of these changes that have made to the historical features of the building. I think it was just in the plan to eventually let it go when it was time. Parking has also been a big issue. The program design calls for 66 spaces for the force and their vehicles, 10 for public and visitors, and that is appropriate for the current and future staffing needs of the police. Land use was concerned about not having enough parking and asked us to look at maybe structured parking or a garage underneath. And we brought that concern to Kevin at KBA, and he said the site's not big enough. You need enough ramp room to go down into a garage. We also don't have enough room for structured parking on the site. And the most important part there is it adds an exorbitant amount of money to the costs. And knowing what the projects we have on the horizon, well, we want to keep this project as quote-unquote reasonable as possible. Actually, one more point there. Those issues all will be addressed along the final stages of the design. And of course, with our normal site review by the planning board that we always do with every building in town. People always also ask about the firing range. We're definitely planning to move that over to the new building. Currently, it's a 4-bay range, and we want to add one more bay to it. And a few years ago, it was upgraded to the tune of $80,000, and now it's portable and movable. We thought, and the chief and administration, it was very important to keep the firing range. We think that the amount of training and use that they get out of that is paramount to making sure our officers are fully prepared to go out there in the field for anything that they may encounter, and we would not want to go backwards and remove it. It's state-of-the-art. It allows for 27/365 use to have it on site. We don't have to pay overtime for someone to come in and use it or pay extra fees to use someone else's if we have our own. It's very beneficial for all of their training and everything they need, and it causes no disturbance to the neighbors, and it's something that's definitely important to our police station. Next slide, please. Before I get into this slide, I want to touch on something that just came up. Thursday, I got a text from an abutter who lives on Sleeper Drive, and I got word of a letter that went to some of you. I think it went to our Precinct 3 town meeting members, and I was very surprised to hear about this letter coming from the abutters and neighbors with concerns. And the reason why I was concerned and surprised was that we had a meeting with the abutters, and 15, 20 abutters came, and we presented the plan and answered their questions, heard them out, and it was a very positive meeting. And everyone left that meeting feeling good about the project and the support from the neighbors. So when I got word of this letter, I drove right over, met him at the site. We walked the site. I explained what was happening and what wasn't happening. And I think what caused some of the concerns were the stakes in the ground and how they were bordering the closest abutter. And I told them those were in no way going to mark the edge of the building. They were only marking the edge of the plot and the parcel, something that's typically done when there's a rezoning. And he was very happy to hear that and relieved. I showed him the plan on my phone. Also, I stopped by and knocked on the doors of the 3 closest abutters, did the same thing. I got a hold of one of them, spent a good half hour in her living room talking about the plan. She was very happy I came right over. Just wanted to give them a face and a name and let them know we are taking their considerations seriously. I missed the other 2, but left my card, had a nice conversation with the closest abutter. She was so happy that I returned her call right away, and also got another call from another abutter around the corner. And the gist of all these meetings and conversations, they wanted everyone to know that they were first surprised at the uproar the letter caused. And as we all know, the pen is definitely mightier than the sword. But they wanted everyone to know they're in support of the project. They support our police, and they know this is long overdue. And they did not mean to cause this type of uproar. They just wanted to make us aware and of their concerns to maximize the amount of trees we save, the amount of green space we save, and minimize the impact to the neighborhood. And I assured them that these things have been at the forefront of every single decision we've made so far, and will continue to be at the forefront for the duration of the project. I even went so far as to offer them bi-weekly or monthly updates, offered to even hold neighborhood update meetings. I even went so far as for those 4 folks, we had a person leave the building committee, offered them to come join the building committee, gave them a seat right at the table to join us, have firsthand knowledge, firsthand hands-on on the project. And they all were very thankful, very appreciative, but said, thanks, but no thanks. We all have our own busy lives. We're glad you guys are taking on this undertaking. We support you, and they love the website. They said, please keep that website updated so we can follow along. Something we're definitely going to do. And I left them my name, my number, and I said, literally call, text, email me at any hour of the day. I don't sleep well. I have no life. I will respond quickly and to you with your concerns. It's that important to me and to the board and administration and the police administration and the force that we build a building here that not only our force can be proud of, but town government can be proud of, the whole town can be proud of, and most importantly, the abutters and neighbors. I want everyone to be proud of this building once it goes up. So that's the kind of the gist of those conversations. I felt really good talking to those folks and giving them a face and a name and someone to reach out to with any questions. Back to the fun. So we have a proposed site layout here. In the feasibility study, they determined that a hinged building design was the best type of building to build, because it gave us an ability to move closer to Center Street, away from the aforementioned abutters. It also minimizes the impact on existing trees, maximizes the green space we can save. It moves the entrance away from that intersection of Center and Bedford Street. And there's also going to be an auxiliary building in the back that serves as a visual and sound barrier to the abutters. And yes, that big maple right in the front, everyone's wondering about, that's going to be saved. The one right next to the fire hydrant. People have asked about that. Next slide, please. It's just another view. So funding plan, as Mr. Eiler mentioned, the total soup to nuts cost of the project is $46,225,000, and it kind of gives me a little shake to say that, but that is the complete cost. That's construction, demolition, moving, swing space, everything that we need to get this project done. Short-term borrowing will begin in FY25. We're expecting a 25-year note at 5%. And as Mr. Eiler mentioned, he said median, I'm going to say average. Tax impact on the average home is $150 per year. Of course, if your home is worth more, it's going to be more. If it's less, it'll be less. And those first payments will be due in FY26. Also, and we're going to take a look at using other resources to kind of bring down the total cost. And The reason why we're going to wait for that to consider free cash is we want to, as we have achieved the highest bond rating, maintain that rating so we can get the best interest rate possible for this project, any potential project coming down the line. And also, one of the things that they look at in those bond ratings is the amount of assets the town has available, and one of those is definitely free cash. So we want to keep those at a healthy limit as we start the borrowing process. And another question many people have asked, are there state grants we can get to help us out, like the MSBA? And unfortunately, there are no state grants for public safety buildings. It's been proposed and tried on Beacon Hill, but it has not passed. There are some federal grants, but they're few and far between. They usually go to metropolitan areas or marginalized communities, and basically Burlington wouldn't even get a sniff at any of that money, unfortunately. So we have looked into it. Next slide. The zoning plan, Article 32 removes Development Area 2, or what other people know as the Sculpture Park area, out of the Grandview PDD. Article 33 rezones the area into the Limited Business District, which is BL, which allows for a police station. And all three articles require a two-thirds vote majority to pass tonight, which we're hoping from all of you tonight. After the construction is completed, as we have promised at every meeting, all along the way, any land we do not use from that Development Area 2 Sculpture Park area, we're going to rezone back into the Grandview PDD to preserve it as green space. Next slide. So what's next? Providing we're fortunate enough to get your approval tonight on all three articles, the next 10 months will be the design phase. We're going to put out to bid for a project manager and a construction company. The build-out will take 18 to 24 months. In that time, probably the very near future, we're going to address the Sculpture Park location. It is my true desire to keep it exactly where it is, and that's a possibility with the plans we initially have. But if not, Select Board Member Tigas and I have already met with the chairman of the Sculpture Park, Barbara LaRue. We've had an initial meeting to discuss potential sites for the Sculpture Park. It will live on no matter what happens with the building. Another thing that we're going to look at right away is the sustainability options. We've had a lot of requests to take a look at every option possible to make the building as sustainable as possible, and that's definitely on the docket. While the building's under construction, we're going to move our force into some swing space. Different options there. One is a trailer farm, preferably on town-owned land, to kind of keep the costs down. Or we could look at renting some open, free commercial space. And people telling me that I've heard we've had some unfortunately, some available here in town. And it might even be a combination of both. If we do look for commercial space to rent, we'll definitely get Melissa and the economic development team on board to help us find the best place to rent and house our police force during construction. Next slide. Last section of the presentation, thank you for bearing with me, are just some designs, different designs. Want to stress, nothing has been decided yet. These are all preliminary ideas, and we're open to your feedback. We want to hear what you guys think, what you guys want to see. Everyone's opinion matters, and we want to make this, again, a collaborative effort. We want to make the best station possible. So the first design was, I think everyone saw this last time, it's the colonial concept, using that hinged building look. And this building is actually tilted a little bit. That front foyer would face the flagpoles at the intersection of Center and Olympian Way, not as opposed to out to the town center. Kind of gives you the colonial design. This next design came from a suggestion by Mike Hardy on the building committee. He wanted to see a building that looked a little bit more like the Union School. And I think they did a good job here of trying to replicate some of the features of the Union School to keep it in people's memories. And one of the things I like about both of these designs is that right side of the building looks a lot like Grandview Farm. So I think putting that next to Grandview Farm, a couple of people have mentioned when they looked at the video that it blends right in and it sits really nicely. We've also, next slide please, had requests to go a traditional brick to match the other buildings on the other side, Town Hall. We can do that too with kind of a little bit more modern look, matching Town Hall, the annex, the Shea Murphy building. Again, whatever way we want to go, whatever way works best for everyone can be done on the outside. Next slide. And this is another traditional view with the brick, a little bit different design, but it gives you a different view from the other side and how it would blend in with Town Hall, the annex, and the Human Services building. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone about that website. The abutters really love it, and it's a great way to stay updated on the project. It's newburlingtonpoliceproject.org. And I think, in closing, this building is long overdue. It's time for Burlington to build a police station that matches the excellence that our officers show out there in the field every day, and it's time for us to do that for them. So we would appreciate your support tonight for the police station. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've heard on the finances, we've heard on the design. Last piece, I guess, is the zoning issues. Mr. Gaffney for the planning board, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Gaffney, Planning Board. So the Planning Board on number 32 and 33 were split votes, 3 and 3, 3 in favor, 3 against. The votes in favor acknowledge the urgent need for the immediate action on the police station. The members vote in favor believe the Planning Board, through the site plan process, can minimize the amount of land taken for the open space parcel. They trust that the town administration will honor its promise to rezone all land that's not required for the open space upon completion. Those who voted against it were also in favor of a new police station. I think I want to stress that. The dissenting vote has to do with the lack of a plan for rezoning a parcel that was voted by a town-wide vote to keep it as open space. How much is needed and for what use is a moving target. Ultimately, none may be needed. Zoning changes require a high threshold of understanding of the details of a plan. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we've heard from all the boards and committees involved. Is there anybody I missed? Excuse me, Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, Ms. Ellis? Oh, and Land Use probably also. Mr. Wadilla after this.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. Wow, it's been a long day. The vote for our committee was 6-0 in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Wadilla, please.
Thank you. Dave Wadilla, Chair of the Land Use Committee. On Article 32, which was the Grandview Farm PDD change to BL, the positions were 4-6 against 0, abstain 2. So there was quite a bit of discussion on this. Obviously, there's an evident need for parking tied with the renovation of the police station, right? We can see it here. But nobody on the committee is enamored with removing land that's expressly reserved for the purpose of, and let me quote from the PDD, open field to be used only for horticultural, floricultural, passive recreation, or any combination thereof. No structures shall be permitted. Laying down asphalt for a parking lot is as polar opposite to the intended purposes of this land as you can get. The town administrator is committed to returning any unused land to the PDD development state following the completion of the project, which is absolutely helpful and aligns with the original intent of this land. The town administrator also clearly stated that there are current concept plans that do not use any of the PDD development area 2. We see concept plans that use some of the Area 2 land, and in discussions with the group, it also became clear that the concept plans that are shown only show current parking requirements and not parking requirements that are expansive to the additions to the building. So essentially, we go from 0 use of the land to possibly full use of the land and just an unknown as to what the project will take. Town administrator was also open to evaluating the potential for structured parking. Quick discussions suggest this could be done within the existing zoning. It would be preferable to paving over the PDD Area 2 area, and it could be a real solution to the chronic police library parking problems. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. On our Article 33, which was amending the zoning map, okay, there were 5 people for, 0 against, and 3 abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, now we've heard from every committee. Mr. DiTucci, I know you had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. Just as a point of information, the planning board actually had a vote on this twice. I did attend all the planning board meetings. I guess the first vote from the planning board was 5 to support and 2 against. And the second vote, the only one that you just heard, was 3-3. The 3-3 vote, one of the planning board members was absent, and one of the planning board members flipped on that. The reason why the 2 votes was because I guess town council had said there was a little bit of wording that has to be corrected without changing the content of the actual article. So that's all, just as a point of clarification. The very first vote was 5-3 in favor from the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiTucci. Okay, now let's open this up to the body for a discussion. Ms. Huntoon.
Thank you. Michelle Huntoon, Precinct 1. I'm just looking for information about, so we have these 3 separate articles that are all trying to do the same thing and work together. So what happens if Article 20 passes and we all agree to move forward with the funding, but then there's an issue on the vote with either of the zoning articles? Will the project move forward and just work with the space that you have, or what's the plan in that situation?
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We would not be able to build a next-generation police station without the additional land. So if the zoning articles, the funding were to pass and zoning articles were to fail, I believe that we would go back to the beginning and start over.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Through the moderator to the planning board, I just have a question. Obviously, we know that there was an absence when the second vote took place, but there was obviously a shift in opinion. Do we know what triggered that to the planning board?
Come all the way down, please, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, that was an individual vote. Their personal opinion, was not communicated. So the vote stands as it is. Thank you.
Further discussion on this? Mr. Boyven.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. Just want to point out that as a member of the Conservation Commission will have some input into the design of this building as well as we enforce the stormwater bylaw. And of course, our motivation will be to make sure the rules are met and as much green space as possible is protected. So we'll have some input, hopefully, into that as well. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Ms. Lohr?
Sharon Laurie, Precinct 3. So I took the opportunity of literally walking to the police station unannounced, and I asked for a tour. I was annoyed because when I went in there, there's this window that they can see you, but you can't see them. So I'm talking to like foil paper. Then they agreed to give me and my friend a tour. When they say there's mold in there, there is mold. when they say there are cracks all over the place, there are cracks. When you talk about mold, you talk about allergies. Long-term black mold is cancer. You talk about the police protecting the citizens of Burlington. If we, the town meeting members, can't protect our police, there's a problem. There's a big disconnect here. Now, I believe the sculpture park, that's a unique situation, and that's there for a reason. So if they can find a way to use as little land as possible, that would be great. Burlington is supposed to become a progressive community. We're asking for state-of-the-art things in our community. We're supposed to take care of our community. The police take care of our community. We need to take care of the police. And so to me, this is a no-brainer because the police are not safe. There's also security breaches, and I'm going to leave it at that. They're truly there. So what they're saying is the truth. And they did not know I was coming at all, but they were gracious. And I asked the officer, the sergeant, what would you like to see? So his response was interesting because he said, my wife is worried about me every time I go into the building, not go out into the field, but go into the building. She just wants me to be safe. I want my fellow officers to be safe. Now, he could have said anything to me to try to sway me, but I believe he was telling me the truth. And I believe the truth is we need a new police station. They deserve to be safe. It deserves to be something that's innovative that all of us in the town of Burlington can be proud of. Thank you.
Further questions, discussion, comments from the body? Mr. Rufffield.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alex Rutfield, Precinct 5. I noticed there is a larger increase in parking with the new plan relative to what we have. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's necessary, and is it possible to have reduced parking but keep everything else pretty similar, and why that wouldn't work?
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to be clear. I think that may be something we missed along the way, but the current concept and proposal does have enough parking for the police station itself for the next 50 or 60 years. It was all factored in. So currently, we have an undersized parking lot. We have some officers that sometimes drift into the library behind the Shea Murphy building, Town Hall. Some officers are currently parking on the street across from the Common. One of the difficult things for us to do, if we're fortunate enough to get town meeting's approval for this project, is we're going to need to balance those needs. I think we've heard a lot from the planning board over the years that they don't like large expanses of parking, and I agree with them. It's not pretty, and this property is in our town center, which is extremely beautiful. But also, I think, we heard some different concerns at the Land Use Committee, that is it possible to build in some more parking to assist? I mean, we're never going to have enough parking for Celebrate Burlington or something like that, but, even a modestly large event on the Common creates a parking issue. So that if we're fortunate enough to get funding, the police station building committee is going to have to sort through all this and try to maximize the amount of maximize the amount of parking. But again, a difficult balance between parking and green space in the town center. So I believe the police station building committee will have its hands full trying to balance out all those priorities. I'm confident we can get there to a project that will make everybody happy. We ultimately will be attending the planning board for site plan approval as well. So that's a little bit about the parking, but the facility as designed in the concept does have enough parking for the police facility for the next 50, 60 years.
Thank you, Mr. Sinesi. Mr. Maury, did I see you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bruce Maury, Precinct 1. I'm in support of this article. I'm disappointed in the price, but that's the market issues that we're dealing with right now. So I am interested, and I do support the idea that I've heard in some of the conversations. Town Meeting Member Eiler and Mr. Espejo mentioned the potential use of free cash as part of this project. And if we bonded at $46 million at whatever the rate is, would the free cash be used to pay aggressively toward the principal? Or talk to me a little bit about some of the ideas around that. I think if we can be creative around that, we as an organization, we as an entity, as the town of Burlington, have been very good at maintaining that free cash amount. Let's maybe use that for some of these bigger projects to maybe lessen the tax burden for our constituents and residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maury. Ms. Bonacera, do you have a question back there? Oh, there's a question you have to answer? Well, hurry up.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we do intend upon using free cash. I think I mentioned it in the opening budget presentation that over the past 10 years, with the assistance of town meeting, we've used $30 million worth of free cash was used to pay for projects that we would normally borrow for. We've done that in a variety of different ways, either asking town meeting to fund it directly from free cash. I'm talking about roads, water mains, a variety of other projects. There's another mechanism where most of these projects are funded. The projects are basically funded in the beginning. We don't borrow all the money at once. I mean, unless there was some really unique interest rate conditions.
Hello. Hi. Can you tell me the phone number of the woman that you talked to last night?
I'm not giving him my phone number.
Okay, so back to business a little bit. So the way these projects are funded, and I'll just use this project as an example. So we don't need all the money at once, obviously. So the timeline on the project is approximately 3 years. The first 10 months will be with the actual design. We'd have to go out to bid, find a construction company, and then an approximate 18 to 24 month construction phase. Now, we'll borrow money temporarily at the beginning, and as we do that, we don't have a principal payment, we have an interest payment, but we can make decisions along the way in terms of, let's just say we start out with $2 million, and we want to use $1 million of free cash at that time. We can pay $1 million off as we refinance that short-term borrowing, and that's what we've done consistently, as I've said, within the past 10 years to the tune of about $30 million with your assistance. That's a DPW building that we kept off the debt schedule by utilizing that financing mechanism. Mr. Espejo noted at the beginning, we are very proud of our bond rating, AAA, which is better than the U.S. government. And one of the key things that they look at when they review us, and every time we borrow money, they give us a full, thorough review. One of the things they look at is reserves. So we did not propose free cash right now tonight to lessen the cost of this project, because when we sit down to borrow some money next year, we mentioned earlier there's some additional projects coming. We do want to have reserves, good financial reserves, so that we can protect our bond rating. That bond rating gives us the most preferential interest rate. So short answer for a long discussion is that we do plan on utilizing free cash for all future projects. It's just a question of timing, how much and when, and we will do so on this project as well.
Now, Ms. Bonacera, did you have a question?
Nancy Bonacera, Precinct 4. I'm very much in support of this project. I just had a question because the health conditions are so bad right now. You mentioned the swing space, so if we go ahead and pass this tonight, how soon can we start working on getting officers into that swing space? Would it be after the plan is complete, or could we do that in the interim while we're waiting to get that done? Because it is very concerning. And I guess probably the question everyone also has is, how did it get this bad? I mean, I feel awful hearing that it's that bad and they have to go there every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If we're successful this evening, I do believe that we'll start looking for swing space tomorrow. I do want to say that we do believe that the air condition of the air is terrible, but we don't believe it to be unhealthy air at this time. I mean, I wouldn't, it's like working in a locker room. Certainly no one would want to be breathing that air all day. But we would not have the officers in the building if we were aware that the air is officially unhealthy. So we will start looking for swing space, and assuming that we find suitable amount of swing space, and we'll obviously have to work within a budget, I think that transition will be starting sooner rather than later. Like I say, I think it's about a 10-month time for us to actually do the design and figure out a construction company. And over those 10 months, we'll have to figure out the swing space. We obviously have brand new communications equipment that we need to move out of there and get set up and functional at another location. So the actual moving of the department is actually going to be quite a project in its own right. But we will, we'll start the search for swing space tomorrow if in fact we are fortunate enough to get your support tonight.
Ms. Altman.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. I am all for this project, and one of the reasons why is when they came before capital budget, the new police station is going to have a fitness center, and I think this will greatly enhance the health status of our police force. I'm a big fanatic for staying healthy. My question is, will other town departments close to the police station be able to use the fitness center, like the fire department or town hall or the library people, or will it only be for the police force?
Chief Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At this point, Ms. Altman, we would only allow the police employees to use it because there are security risks, and obviously there are some steps we have to take anytime we let somebody into the building, and also for liability issues. So as an example, anytime one of our officers uses the gym, they have to have a liability waiver on file with us, so we would keep it to police employees.
Thank you very much.
Just to add, the fire station does have a fitness center as well. Town hall, all we have is a crappy old shower, kind of like Freddy Krueger type thing. But fire department has it as well.
Ms. Warren.
Chris Warren, Precinct 4. I'm definitely in support of the police station. We should have done it 10 years ago. I'm not sure, with the parking issue, I think, and I apologize if I missed this, how many parking spaces are there now? How many are being proposed, and how many parking spaces would go onto the Grandview Farm field?
Chief Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The parking lot right now, I believe, is about 43 spaces. The proposed new site would be 66 secured spaces and then 10 for visitors. As far as how many are going to lay over into that open space, I'm not sure. It is out on the plan right now. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it would be 66 secured spaces in total.
Ms. Asher.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. I don't think I saw it in any of the design layouts, but it seems like it would be important in modernizing, not just to have it be in the aesthetics, but in the safety features. And just wanted to make a comment around barriers set up for automobiles, to protect the building and so on, and the safety of the officers, but also obviously the investment, and having them be both at the street side and right in front of the building.
Chief Brown?
Thank you. I'm sorry, was it a question as far as the design? Okay, so yes, we would certainly consider it. We have them on the building now. We put them in probably about 8 to 10 years ago on the front of the station. So we would look to carry that forward in the new design, and working with KBA. They've got quite a resume with public safety buildings, so I'm sure we'd take their advice on the plan as well.
Mr. Glantz?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nolan Glantz, Precinct 1. First of all, thank you for spreading this out. It definitely works a lot better. Second of all, I'm definitely in favor of this. I think it's been a long time coming. I think that the space issues, I definitely trust will be able to be worked out as best as possible. I spent some time staring at the aerial view that you had up there a little while ago, and I think it's going to work out okay. Meanwhile, Mr. Eiler, I really appreciate your presentation regarding the overall financial context for this project with the other projects going on. And I'm definitely keeping in mind, and I urge others to keep in mind as well, that entire picture, because with another potential vote coming in September, I'm voting this in mind that, kind of both, as opposed to, well, one or the other, and that kind of thing. So, in September, we wouldn't want to be thinking, well, wish we hadn't done that because now we got to do this or something like that. So I think it's a good idea. Appreciate it.
Ms. Norum?
Hello. Becky Norum, Precinct 4. I think this question is for John. John, I really appreciate the presentation. That was very thorough, and I appreciate that you put it on paper, as I'm a visual learner. My question for you is, a number of the numbers were sort of assuming we do Fox Hill and the police. While I'm fully in support of the police work, I haven't decided on Fox Hill, waiting to hear more about it. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to disentangling it. I appreciated seeing them together, as Mr. Glantz said, but if we just ended up doing the police, what changes about your projections? Thank you.
Mr. Eiler?
Okay, I'll admit we didn't do that exact projection, but given that, basically there's two things considered there. If we look at the worst case, as noted there, with an exclusion on both, it would be 11 years before we ran into the levy limit from Prop 2.5. Without the exclusion, it would be more like 6 years. If for some reason we decided to do only the police station, I would expect that even without the exclusion, then that would be well over 10 years then before we would hit the limit, since the two projects together are about $100 million worth of borrowing, and the police station is 46 of that. So.
Ms. Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Precinct 3. Kind of a two-part question. In that 46 million plus, somebody did mention about, I think it was the land use, about some sustainability items being thought about. I've heard the geothermal, maybe solar. Does that number include a lot of those issues that could be brought forward? Part A, and Part B is, should we go out to bid and the number is larger than the 46 that we are approving tonight, what is the process going forward for that? Thank you.
Chief Brown?
Mr. Moderator, if I may, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Kevin Witzel. Kevin is from KBA, and he's been our project manager and lead architect. He'd be best suited to answer that question on sustainability.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Currently, right now, there is no, we explored the costs for putting geothermal in. It was approximately a $2 million premium to do. We felt that that was going to put us over the limit of where we really wanted to be from an overall project number. So that was not included in part of that cost. What is included in part of the cost is part of the building code is a requirement that we provide the structural capabilities to support photovoltaic solar panels on the roof going forward. Because the project is as everybody's talked about, it's about a 2-year construction project plus a year of design. 3 years out, we don't want to be buying that as part of today's technology. So we would recommend that if there is a desire to go through with that, that would be a separately funded activity for the project, so that we could do either solar panels on the building, we could do on, as we've seen on a number of other communities and public safety projects, putting in carports and that would give more energy generation capabilities and also provide a secondary benefit to the department of having covered parking for some of the fleet of their fleet vehicles. As far as if the costs were overrun, I guess that's more of a question for the town administration. But the overrun would be basically on the cost of, I want to be kind of careful, at the $46.2 million is the total project costs. The actual construction cost is estimated to be approximately $34 million. So that would be the number that we'd be looking to get on bid day when we open the bids in approximately a year if we would be so lucky to proceed forward with the project. But I'll give it to the town to talk about what those efforts might be to override.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So Sherry, I guess it would all depend upon how much are we off. You know, if the quotes come in $100,000 more, you know, we would have to evaluate, I guess, what they call value engineering changes. Is there anything we can change out on the project? But if the project comes in significantly more than's budgeted, we obviously can't move forward because we don't have enough money to actually sign a contract to do the project unless we have an available appropriation. So I guess a lot of it will depend upon what is the actual overage at that time, and then we'll have to make some decisions.
Follow up, Ms. Ellis?
So thank you for that explanation. So my understanding then from what the architect said was what is put into the design so far, which there's not design documents, but is really basically to just go by the stretch energy code that we have currently adopted, and there's nothing further in addition to that. If we wanted to do that, we would have to come back at a later time and get more money to do that. Correct?
Yeah, basically, yes. If you wanted to put in anything in excess of that, typically you are a stretch energy code, so community, so we would meet that at a very minimum. We do try to do other elements, which we call kind of low-hanging fruit. We will be using all LED lights. We will be using high-efficiency boilers. We will be using room occupancy sensors so that if rooms are not being occupied, it senses that there's nobody there. It takes the mechanical systems down to an unoccupied level. The building energy management system would be programmable so that third shift at 11 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning goes to almost an unoccupied mode for all of those places in the building where nobody's going to be, so we're not wasting any energy and any money on energy for those spaces where nobody's going to be in. But we like to say that we try to get it so that it's almost LEED certifiable without actually going to get the full LEED certification from an energy conservation standpoint. But any measures that we can do that are just plain good design, we include those as part of as part of our design process.
Mr. Marchese, up at the back.
Thank you. Steve Marchese, Precinct 3. I've been in favor of a police station since it was promised to Mike Kent many years ago. So my question, Paul, the $46 million. Could you possibly give me a breakdown in how confident you are in those numbers? We heard $34 million to build the building, $4.6 million is going for the design of the building. Do you have a breakdown on the swing space, what you anticipate the cost is going to be for the swing space and the other incidental costs? And how confident are you in this $46 million that in 3 years your numbers are not going to balloon out in 3 years when this thing starts to hit the pavement?
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We're as confident as you can be projecting out for a project that's going to be bid in 12 months. The way we've built the budget is we've built it based on basically the hard cost of the construction, which is your bricks, your mortar, to actually build the building. We also, to that number, we added an escalation amount so that we can hope to be able to be hitting the number that it's going to be in 12 months. As part of the other part of the budget, we have equipment costs. So we've included costs for new computers, an antenna, furniture, any other loose equipment that goes in to operate the building itself. That also includes the mechanical systems for the firing range, which are very specialized units to provide proper fresh air and filtration so that as it exhausts, it's not polluting the environment. And then on top of that, we have what's called owner's indirect costs. Those would be design fees, those would be Euro PM's fees, those would be any kind of legal expenses for advertising, printing, moving costs. So we've tried to put a comprehensive opinion of probable cost for the project. Every step of the way, we've tried to put a little bit of a contingency in there, realizing that prices are never going down. They always seem to go up a little bit, so that when we come to you folks with a number of approximately $46.2 million, we don't anticipate that we're going to need to come back. Nobody can project if there's going to be another pandemic or some other catastrophic event that's going to greatly affect costs and prices. But we've tried to account for as many unforeseen things as we can with a reasonable amount, because the last thing that we want to do is be able to have to come back to look for more additional funds to make the project work.
I mean, you don't have any numbers on that, Kevin, do you, by any chance? You know, just how much is it going to cost, do you anticipate, for a swing space? How much is it going to, just rough numbers?
As part of the indirect cost, I neglected to mention that part. We were carrying approximately $2 million for swing space for approximately 2 years plus for the department to move into. As it was discussed earlier, it could either be a trailer farm where we put the administration of the department into that for a couple of years while we build the new station, or it could be utilizing short-term lease at some existing commercial properties. But we have put a fairly decent number of approximately $2 million for that relocation and temporary housing for the department.
Mr. Collins.
Hello. Hi, Dan Collins, Precinct 6. So we just approved about $14 million off of free cash a couple days ago. And I think that's just about typical from year to year. So I wanted to kind of get an idea if there's going to be some trimming back on some of those extra expenses to free cash in the coming years to hopefully maybe be a little bit more aggressive on the principle for these big projects coming up, or even operating cost cuts or anything like that. Just want to know if that's been considered.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Collins? I'm not sure that's germane to this current discussion.
My question's directly about how we're going to pay this off. And so I was curious if ongoing cuts might be made towards free cash warrant articles or operating costs in order to have a little bit more money. Because if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about the numbers, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we approved about 14 million. We're going to replenish free cash with another 13 million, something like that. So I didn't know if maybe next year we might see something more like 10 million off the free cash and that sort of thing. That way we'd have a little bit more excess, aggressive payment.
Mr. Sagarino, is that a question you can answer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we run through that exercise every year, and I think everybody's aware that we've been very fortunate the past few years with free cash. So I think if you were to look at the amounts in Article 7, the total amount, that would sort of be what we would be typically looking at from free cash on an annual warrant article basis, town and school. When you see some additional items here in the future, we have a fire truck. You know, that may typically be a borrow for us, but because of the availability of free cash, and because we want to limit the amount we're borrowing, we're requesting the free cash be utilized. But again, that would typically be a borrow for us. So as I see us move forward, we have this discussion every year with the Ways and Means Committee. You know, what's the best way to utilize our free cash to sort of keep debt off the schedule, to fund our pay-as-you-go capital, but also like with an eye on how much free cash are we carrying forward to next year. And I think that number is close to 16 million. So that's kind of where we start with. How much do we want to carry forward as our baseline for next year? So we know kind of if we have a lousy operating year and we didn't generate any free cash, we'll still be starting off with 16. These other options that have been provided are really, you know, sound business decisions to sort of utilize cash in pocket to avoid borrowing and keep that off our debt schedule so we can keep it clear for some of the bigger projects we have moving forward. But we do that analysis every year.
Follow up?
Just a quick follow-up on if this is looking at about a 5% borrow rate, is that similar to what would have been borrowed for a fire engine or whatever?
In terms of the rate, it wouldn't change much whether it's a fire engine or a building. The only thing that would really change there would be the term, the length of the borrowing. I mean, the past 10, 15 years, we've had really exceptionally low interest rates. So this is more typical, the 5%. I mean, if you consider what a consumer could get, it's still a pretty good rate. That's a very conservative estimate. I think that some of the higher rated municipal borrowings have been coming out recently around 4% as a net interest cost. So we hope to do a little bit better than that.
Mr. DeBona.
Jeff DeBona, Precinct 3. Motion to move the question.
There's been a motion to move the question. Requires a 2/3 vote to end discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? There's a clear 2/3 majority in favor of moving the question. So we will move forward. We will first be voting on Article 20 to see if we'll vote to appropriate the money. As this will be bonded, this requires a 2/3 vote. Yes, Pat?
Or are we just taking the...
This is just for 20 at the moment. Okay, we're voting on Article 20. Ms. Ellis.
Just a clarification. If the zoning articles are not approved, then this funding article doesn't go forward from my understanding. So why are we not voting the zoning articles first?
Because we're voting them in the order in which they appear. We're going to vote this one first.
Okay.
We'll cross that other bridge, or we'll burn that other bridge when we get there. Okay, this is a 2/3 vote. I'll need a clear 2/3 So all those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? There being 2 votes against it, it's a clear 2/3 majority, and Article 20 passes. Okay, let's move on to Article 32. We've heard the recommendations and the comments from the Planning Board. Are there further discussions or questions from the body on this article? Seeing none, we'll put this to a vote. This is also a 2/3. All right, this requires, again, a clear 2/3. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? There being 4 votes against, it's a clear 2/3 majority. Article 32 passes. Brings us to Article 33. Any discussion from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? There being 3 people opposed, the motion is clearly more than 2/3, and Article 33 passes. So thank you. Congratulations, Chief. You know, we've been going for an hour and a half, and Myrna hasn't had her stretch yet, so we'll take a 2-minute stretch break, because I do not want Myrna on my case. Do you think we can get back down to our business now? Hopefully, we've had enough stress to keep Myrna happy.
Not a bad thing, but the concept is
But once a little bit long, if you ever do it again in 2 hours, or 2 hours will be behind you. Okay, could I have people get back to their seats and we'll continue with Article 8. Okay, Article 8 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to accept from Chapter 90 money from the state, $1,058,711.92. Really? 92 cents on $1 million? Come on. Is there any discussion and questions about accepting money? Oh, Mr. Eiler, please. Don't tell me Ways and Means voted against it.
Thank you. I'd like to point out that 92 cents is important. Burlington has 100 miles of roads in our 12 square miles, which interestingly adds up to about 8 miles of roads per square mile. So every year, the state allocates money to towns for road maintenance and improvement. That money is added to the money we allocate in later Article 13 for a similar purpose. And so every year we have an article to accept this money, which, as the moderator pointed out, we love, so we voted 10-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Any questions on accepting money? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Article 8 passes. Article 9, to see if the town will vote to transfer from the sewer inflow infiltration fund the sum of $107,975 for the purpose of paying the FY 2025 debt service to the MWRA. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the town's constantly working to reduce the non-sewer inflow that goes into the sewer system in order to reduce the volume that's required to be treated. About every 2 or 3 years, we participate in a loan grant program from the state to help fund this. 75% of what we receive from the state is a grant, so we're only paying back 25% of it as a 10-year loan, and it's 0% interest, so it's a very good deal. The money from the sewer connection fees go to the town inflow infiltration fund, which is in turn is used to pay off the loans. So this doesn't come from your taxes, it's coming from those connection fees. So the amount here is what's due this year. We recommend paying off our debts with a vote 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Question on this article? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Article 10. It's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. It is as printed in the warrant, and it's to see if we'll authorize the sum of $6,453,000 to operate the sewer system this coming year. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Our sewer bill collections go into the town sewer enterprise fund. town meeting then authorizes transfer of that money to pay our sewer expenses. I'll just point out, much like our real estate taxes, the commercial sector is subsidizing residential water and sewer expenses by paying a higher rate than you do for your residential rates. So you, once again, thank our businesses. But an interesting measure of economic activity in town is how much commercial sector is paying in sewer fees. And it turns out this is down during the pandemic. But it's expected that, once again, sewer fees will, again, fully cover expenses. They almost do this year and will completely again in FY26. The Sewer Enterprise Fund has a pretty healthy balance that's projected to be still $2 million after this payment, so we're in very good condition there. So we, Ways and Means recommended paying our sewer bills 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Article 10 passes. Article 11. It's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will transfer from the Water Stabilization Fund the sum of $1,567,700 to cover the operating expenses, MWRA entrance fee, debt service, and miscellaneous expenses related to the connection to the MWRA system. Mr. Eiler, please.
Oh, there we go. So in a similar fashion to the sewer rates, there's sort of a circuitous route from your water bill to actually paying the town's water bill. So the flow is that when you pay your water bill, it goes into the general fund. At the end of the year, that it closes out the free cash. We then vote in January to move that to the Water Stabilization Fund. And then finally, in this article, we vote to move the money from the Water Stabilization Fund into the operating budget to actually pay the water bill. So the bottom line is you're really voting to use your water bill money to pay the town's water bills. So we recommend this 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions on this article? Seeing none? All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? It looks unanimous, which is a clear 2/3. Article 12 for a fire engine has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,200,000 for the purpose of purchasing and fitting out a fire engine, same to be spent under the direction of the town administrator. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is to replace one of our pumper fire engines. In general, we try to keep fire engines in service for 20 years, basically 15 years being on the line and 5 years as a backup. The one that's being replaced is a 2008. There's about a 3 to 4 year lead time on these from when you order them. So that means that the engine being replaced will be 20 years old when it's being replaced. Ways and Means Sub did go and actually eyeball the fire engine, and in fact does have significant chunks of rust coming off, so it is coming due. Unfortunately, there's not a highly competitive market for supplying fire engines, as you might imagine, so it's a tough one to bargain down, but there will be competitive quotes obtained when time comes to actually order this. So Ways and Means supported this 12-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions from the body? Oh, capital budget, excuse me. Don't mean to slight you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7, capital budget voted in favor 700.
Thank you, Mark. Now, questions from the body. Seeing none, put it to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Article 13, roads, parking lots, and sidewalk paving. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $3,500,000 for the purpose of funding the paving for roads, parking lots, and sidewalks to be spent under the direction of the town administrator. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is an article that we have every 2 years. The money from this would be in addition to what we accept from the state for Chapter 90 that you just voted on in Article 8. The plan is to divide this in roughly 3 different areas where $2 million would be going to our 100 miles of roads in town, $1 million would be going to our 50 miles of sidewalks in town, and $500,000 would be going to our 47 municipal parking lots. DPW's done a great job of, in the backup, showing you exactly the streets and areas that would likely be worked on in the coming year, so you can take a look in the backup if you're interested in that. Ways and Means vote to support this 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Mr. Woods, please. Capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7, capital budget voted in favor 700.
Thank you, Mark. Questions from the body? Mr. Boyven.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. I just noticed on the sheet showing the individual streets being paved that most of them have a cost of $22.50 per square yard, but a few of them have $31.50. Could you explain what the difference is, please?
Mr. Hayes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the cost per the type of resurfacing we're doing, so the $22 a square yard is typically for a mill and overlay. We grind off 2 inches and put 2 inches back. The higher price, 30-something, 31, is for complete pulverization. We pulverize the road, so if the road is in really bad shape, can't be saved, pulverize it down to gravel, layer of binder, layer of top. It's more expensive.
Further questions from the body? Yes, sir, up at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ron Riley, Precinct 7. I just have a question about the wording in the article. It says $3.5 million or any other sum. Is the $3.5 million like a not-to-exceed number, or is a vote for this just basically a, open checkbook that you can spend any sum?
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The $3.5 million is a not to exceed. All these numbers are not to exceed. When we do the warrant article book, we try to provide a little bit of flexibility. So, for example, if somebody wanted to move the number around at town meeting, or any other sum is added in there. But once the number is voted at town meeting, that's a not to exceed.
Further questions? Ms. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard. Does this include putting signs on the side of the road where there are some sidewalks that don't have any signage? I know that there are a number of sidewalks around, crosswalks around town that there's nothing to indicate that it's coming up, and people just have a tendency to speed right through them without bothering to stop. So I'm just wondering if we're going to add some signs like some other communities have been doing. Thank you.
Mr. Hayes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So this can include signage. The crosswalk signs, if you've noticed around town, we've gone with a new standard where we have signs front and back, like crosswalks in front of Town Hall and many places throughout town. So the Highway Division, it has a program right now where they're going pretty much street by street. They start at the main streets and they're working their way out, and they're installing these double crosswalk signs at all intersections throughout town. But in some cases, when we're repaving a road, we will refresh some of the signage, but we don't do double duty. You know, if the highway has a budget set, they can spend their money, and then the engineering will spend our money in the road.
Ms. Willard, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If we wanted to request signs at a particular place, is there a way to do that?
Mr. Hayes.
Yes, you could submit a request to the Select Board. Select Board will send it off to the Traffic Committee. The Traffic Committee will evaluate it for compliance with current law, the MUTCD, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, make sure it meets all the law. If they deem it's okay, then it's something that can happen.
And would that have to come back at a town meeting for a financial request? I mean, I have no idea how expensive those signs are.
We have our own people. A sign might be $75. So it's all handled through our operating budget, as long as it's not like 1,000 signs.
Okay, and just a quick question. Do we need to get like a petition filled with signatures in order to ask this to happen?
No, if it's a reasonable request, we can handle it at the staff level.
Thank you.
Anything further? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 14 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $2,500,000 for the purpose of rehabilitation and repairing at the Grandview Ave sewer pumping station to be spent under the direction of the town administrator. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the town has 14 sewer pump stations, and starting back in 2010, we started revamping them all. There's only 2 remaining stations in this program, Grandview, which you're voting on tonight, and Douglas. And after we get through them all, we'll be in just a maintenance phase and won't be spending quite as much on pump stations, hopefully. Knowing people that have lived downhill from a pump station has failed, I can tell you don't want these things to fail. So we really want to be keeping up with this. Back in May of '22, we voted $130K for a design of this work, and so this is to actually do the work, which we support 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions? Capital budget. Sorry. I'm trying to run through. Smack me out close. Slow down, David.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. We support the pump station 700.
Thank you. Now questions from the body. Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to Article 15. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote, is moved as follows: that vote adopted under Article 8 of the warrant at the January 2021 town meeting is hereby amended to permit the funds appropriated and authorized to be borrowed thereunder to pay costs of Phase 2A of the MWRA water connection project, so-called, which are no longer needed to pay costs of completing that project, to also be applied to pay costs of the Phase 2B of such project. I need 2/3 vote on this. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you all know, we've been through a lot of phases on the MWRA water connection. As noted in the article here, Phase 2A, which was the Adams Street connection, has the MWRA entrance fee that was part of that allocation was $4.6 million, and the MWRA fortuitously waived that fee. So the purpose of this article is to reallocate that $4.6 million to Phase 2B, which is the final phase of the project, getting Middlesex Turnpike to Mall Road. And this will finish the MWRA connection program and also pay for the decommissioning of the Vine Brook treatment plant. So upon the completion of this, we'll have 6.5 million gallon per day MWRA capacity on top of the approximately 1.8 million gallons per day that Mill Pond can produce. And just in the fun fact category, we use about 3 million gallons a day on average, with a peak of more around 5 million a day in the summer. So the good news is that the MWRA connection alone would cover our entire usage right now. The MWRA agreement does require us to prioritize production from Mill Pond before using MWRA water. So Ways and Means supported completing this connection program 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Administration have anything to add? Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think Mr. Eiler covered it well. This is not new money. This is borrowing that you previously authorized. We had a lot of positive news during the MWRA project, and one of them was changing the way that the MWRA assesses fees to get in. They waived a $4.6 million fee that we had budgeted in that 9.9 allotment. I know it's kind of strange that the Phase 2B also cost $4.6 million, but it kind of just worked out that way. So this money was already authorized for Phase 2A, and instead of asking you for additional borrowing capacity to finish off the project with Phase 2B, we're just asking you to add the Phase 2B purpose to what we originally did on that warrant article. So we're basically going to use the leftover money from that borrowing to fund Phase 2B, and we need you to update the language of this article in order to do so.
Mr. Wood, capital budget?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. We voted in favor, 7-0.
Thank you, Mark. Questions from the body on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, excuse me, hold on, sorry. Mr. Rutfield.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alex Rutfield at Precinct 5. What's the estimated time of completion for this phase? And just to clarify, once we do this phase, is that the end of the project?
Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the intent would be to begin design in the fall, survey design at the earliest, if all goes right, all goes well, spring of next year, we could hopefully begin construction. We believe it could be constructed within a year. However, it's a good stretch. If it's in Lexington, we ran into some contaminated soils, so things like that could put some delays on it. So it's possible it could run into a second year. Was there a second? Yep, this is the end of the entire MWRA project that we had proposed. This will give us daily average from the MWRA of 3.5 million gallons with a peak of 6.5.
Thank you, Mr. White. Anything further from the body? Seeing none, let's put this to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Looks unanimous. Thank you. Article 16, Mill Pond PFAS resin replacement. Ways and Means has moved this article to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $1,200,000 for the purpose of replacing the filtration media used at the Mill Pond for the PFAS treatment to be spent under the direction of the town administrator. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you know, we put a new PFAS filter online for the Mill Pond water plant. The filter media needs to be replaced periodically, and here we are at that first replacement point. The good news is that the filters are working as anticipated. There's basically 2 filters that are chained together, and at the test point coming out of the first filter, the PFAS is undetectable. So that's great news. Sort of a wild card is, as you may be aware, the Massachusetts standard was 20 parts per trillion, whereas the new EPA standard is 4 parts, so it's quite a bit more stringent. So the impact of that is we definitely meet that standard, but it is likely to shorten the time between media replacement, and we don't know exactly what that time will be yet. But we'll be replacing this time at the 18-month point. You can anticipate that we'll be spending something on the order of $800,000 to $1 million on an annual basis to keep this filter working properly. So Ways and Means supported our water production 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Mr. Woods, please, capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. We support this 700.
Thank you, Mark. Questions from the body? Yes, sir, Mr. Yes, go ahead. Your name slipped off my tongue, sorry.
Hi, Blaze Lieber, Precinct 6. Just was curious if the level of PFAS in the untreated water decreases as more of it becomes filtered, and if so, is there any expectation that one day it will be completely remediated, or is it one of those things like forever it's going to need to be cleaned?
Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, so our source water for Mill Pond, we actually divert the Shawshene River into Mill Pond. So it's pumped from the Shawshene River over. So our source, it's not contained just the Mill Pond. It's coming from the river upstream from Burlington. Ideally, someday maybe we can find out the source of that and work with legislators to get them to clean that up. And hopefully that day, if they're able to reduce it or, probably not eliminate it, but if they can eliminate it, then I don't see any need why DEP would require us to continue to use the filters.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Interest.
Daryl Interest, Precinct 6. I support maintenance, so this isn't critically coming from that angle of it. We don't have breakthrough of the primary vessels. Is this for funding an entire change out of all of the media? Or is there a way to change out the primary, make the secondary the new primary, and I think you know what I'm saying there. And then also the backup, it just looks like a spreadsheet that somebody put together. Where are these costs coming from? Is this quoted market rates or from a vendor? And is this self-performed or performed by a vendor? Thank you.
Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So yeah, this number is to, as Mr. Eiler explained a bit, there's 6 total filters with their trains of 2, so 3 total trains. So this number would be to replace the lead filters. That's a requirement currently by DEP that we always have that lag filter as a method of backup. Yeah, there's funds to just replace 3 of it. Remind me again, just quickly, what the second half of the question was.
The source of the costs are in the backup, and
Sure.
if you self-perform that, or if that's done by a vendor.
Yep, so that came from Calgon. Calgon is the manufacturer of the resin that is in the filters currently. So those are the numbers they gave us directly of what to use for our budget. We added contingency into it. So the pilot program that we ran to get approval to construct these filters estimated that the lead filters would last about 18 months. That puts us at around January. Obviously, I don't feel comfortable trying to push it until next town meeting, so we're not going to be looking to replace this immediately, so there's some time in there, which is why the contingency is a little higher. Additionally, there's a lot of uncertainty of where the waste resin will go. Landfills, if we can find a landfill that will actually take it, it will be a lot cheaper. That number is based off of incinerating it. There's very few places that incinerate. Hopefully, now that the federal standards have been finalized, we're hoping that a lot more industries, incinerators, vendors are going to come onto the market, so hopefully the cost will start to come down since so many people are going to be dealing with it.
Thank you, Mr. White. Anything further from the body? Ms. Warren?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Warren, Precinct 4. Now that the federal standard for PFAS is lower than the state, my understanding is the federal government has released many, many billions of dollars just this year because it's a national problem, and each state is getting a share of that. So my question is, can we expect perhaps to get some federal funding in the future to treat our PFAS concerns? Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we were fortunate with the funding of the filters. Mass DP's SRF loan program, we received a 0% loan from that. There was also a chunk that they, I believe they consider it forgave. Essentially, it's their version of creating it as a grant. They can't label it a grant, but we received several million as a waiver for the construction of the filters. I'm not, we'll keep an eye on the federal money coming out. A lot of it is for the initial construction. I'm not sure that they actually have like O&M funds. On top of that, we've been working with attorneys as joining all the other communities that have been affected on class action lawsuits. So we hope to get a decent payout from that end.
Anything additional? Seeing none? All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries. Brings us to Article 17, Cable Access Enterprise Fund. It is as printed in the warrant. To see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $575,000 to operate the FY 2025 Cable Access Enterprise. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So as part of your monthly cable bill, you have a PEG fee, which stands for Public Educational Governmental. So this is a subscriber fee. That money goes from the cable companies and is put into the enterprise fund. And then this article is to move that money from the enterprise fund to actually fund the BCAT activities that we're enjoying today with this. So it doesn't affect your taxes since it's being paid for with your subscriber fees instead. So Ways and Means supported this 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Question from the body on this. Capital budget, your vote on this? Thank you. Seeing nothing further? All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Article 18, transfer from R&R for ambulance service. It is hereby, it's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee that to see if the town will transfer from receipts reserved account for ambulance services the sum of $360,000 to cover the cost associated with operating ambulance services at the advanced life support paramedic level. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is an article that you can expect to see every year. Back a few years ago when we went from BLS to ALS service, in other words, from EMT to paramedic level service for our ambulance service, we created this receipts reserved account for the ambulance fees. This level of service generates about $460,000 of additional revenue every year. And the idea is to take $360 of that to fund the additional ALS costs that we have each year, this article. And in fact, in the fire department budget that you already approved, it assumes that this transfer is taking place. So part of the fire department budget is funded via these receipts from the ambulance service. The extra $100K of that $460 is set aside each year with the idea that every 5 years we would replace one of our 3 ambulances. So since the ambulances are expected to last about 15 years, if we replace one every 5 years, it all works out very nicely where the ALS service is paying for that ambulance replacement also. So at any rate, this is to allow for the transfer of the $360K from receipts reserved into the operating budget. Ways and Means supported this 12-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Is there a vote of the Select Board?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Select Board voted to support 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Spail. Questions from the body? Seeing none? Let's put it to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? The motion carries. Article 19, to fund the administrative and professional compensation plan, has been withdrawn. Anybody in favor of, anybody against withdrawing it? Thank you, we're done. Let's move on. Article 20, we're done. Article 21. The will of Marshall Simons. This article is as printed in the warrant. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to accept from the trustees under the will of Marshall Simons $77,644.31. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So Marshall Simons died in 1905. He deeded land for our current Simons Park in addition to some money. Some of that money was used to purchase the land that became our town common. And each year, money from the Simons Trust is given to the town, spent under the Rec Commission Department's oversight. Some of the projects that they're envisioning they might do with this money in the coming year would be a scholarship fund for programs, therapeutic rec staff, and a modular trailer for that, Simons Park walkway improvements. So in order to receive this money, 2 readings are required. This is the first reading of 2. In September, we'll have the second where we'll officially accept the money. We're grateful for Marshall Simons for his foresight and recommend receiving this money 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Does the Recreation Commission wish to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Recreation Commission voted 5-0 to accept this money.
Thank you. Looks like we're in agreement to accept money. Discussion from the body. Seeing none, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion's been carried. Article 22, 4th of July Parade. It's been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash $25,000 to pay for expenses associated with the annual 4th of July Parade. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the 4th of July Parade is a great community event. You should definitely go if you haven't been to one. A lot of our civic organizations participate in this. The expectation is that the expenses will be roughly $32,000 for this event, and it's funded with $20,000, hopefully from this article if passed, donations, and part of leftover balance from, isn't it 20,000?
25. You need to listen to me, John.
The motion was 20.
It says 20 in the book.
But the motion that I read was 25.
Oh, apparently there's been inflation. My apologies. Thank you for pointing that out, Roger. This will be funded with $25,000 from this, plus donations, plus leftover balance from last year. It's important that they actually do carry over balance year to year because the expenses are coming in several months before the 4th of July, before we have this vote. So obviously they need to have a little working money. Ways and Means voted on to $20,000, but we would probably be equally enthusiastic about $25,000 for 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions from the body? Mr. Tate.
David Tate, Precinct 5. I'm just curious how it gets to 25 if we went through the process of 20. Not that I'm...
Because the piece of paper that I have says 25?
And who moved that?
John find it. John find it.
John signed it. Mr. Denizio. It's supposed to be 25. I think the 20 was a typo. It's supposed to be 20. The 25 was a typo.
Correct.
It's been moved and seconded that we spend $20,000. We just saved $5,000. Okay, questions from the body? Ms. Saltman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. If you haven't come down to see the parade, you're missing one of the best events in Burlington. To see our fellow citizens and the children and sitting on their beach chairs and on their front stoops and waving and cheering and shouting, there's no greater thrill. And I implore all of you, if you can, to participate in some segment of the parade so you really can see the town people and how much they appreciate the 4th of July parade. I strongly recommend you approve this appropriation.
Mr. Collins.
Hi, Dan Collins. Still working, Precinct 6. So I don't mean to literally rain on anybody's parade, but if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this entirely corporate sponsorship up until just a few years ago, or did we just begin paying the $20,000? I'm just curious about the history of us paying for this as opposed to donations and corporate sponsors.
I think we have a representative from the committee here to answer your question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So as it happens, a select board member has been on the committee for the last few years, which gives this body the opportunity to ask questions of a committee member. So for my tenure and for at least 4 years prior, no, we would come to town meeting and ask for appropriation of dollars to help fund it. Prior to COVID, corporate sponsorship was a lot higher and stronger, which is why I want to say just around the time that I started, just prior to COVID, we were asking for like 10 or 15,000, and since then it's risen because we're having a very difficult time, asking corporate sponsors for more. We have in the last year and a half really doubled down on donations and fundraisers to try and make up the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Further questions from the body? Seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? The motion carries. Oh.
Another typo. Article says 45. The motion should say 45.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Consulting services for town center signage. There's a change in the amount of money from 45 to 40,000.
No, the opposite. There was a typo. This should be 45. The article is correct. The motion needs to be 45. Yeah, that's why they got that little white, yellow slip of paper.
That's not what this says.
John sent us.
The true amount.
Bill's right. Oh, no, it's right. Okay, it's down to 40. Yeah, okay.
Every now and then I'm right.
You know, don't let it happen again.
I won't. Okay. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $40,000 for the purpose of funding consulting services to finalize the town center signage district documents. Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And just so we're clear, it really is 40,000 because that's what the correction said. All right, so our sign bylaws have been out of date for a while, and I know speaking with a previous Board of Appeals chair, they mentioned that it was literally more than half their business was dealing with appeals related to signage. So ZBRC has been starting work on this and has been focusing on the town center area for starters and has created a proposed bylaw revision, but they would like to work with a consultant to basically go over all these changes because it is fairly significant and get their opinions and recommendations. Assuming that things go well with that, ZBRC feels that they probably won't need extra dollars for the other districts. So this is not intended to be a recurring thing for all of them. The amount is not in the backup, but it is based on a couple quotes that they received. They did mention that there's also a possible grant to fund this, which would be great, but we can't assume that will happen. So I think their plan would be to have a new zoning bylaw for town center at our January meeting. So Ways and Means supported this 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Questions from the body? Oh, there's a presentation. Excuse me. Who's presenting? CBRC? Ah.
Hi.
You slipped up there unbeknownst to me. Betsy, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hi, my name is Betsy Hughes. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 7 and on the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, otherwise known as ZBRC. John stole my thunder a little bit, so I'm going to make this as fast as I can, but as thorough as I can. Because this is a presentation that's been 4 years in the making. I'm really excited to be here to represent the ZBRC's signage subcommittee to present this funding request. But before we get started with that, it probably is a good idea to give you some background. As some of you are aware, signage has been a really hot topic in the town for years. We've heard frustration and concern with signage rules or lack thereof from the Zoning Board of Appeals, as John mentioned, from business owners and residents. As a result, ZBRC formed a committee to address these concerns with representation from many areas of town government as business owners and, as we all live in the town, residents. We started the project by researching what had been done in the past in efforts to address the signage issues. Then, informed by that and understanding of history, we developed a strategy to move things forward. We determined that in order to avoid past issues, we needed to take the development of signage regulations in manageable chunks. Burlington is a town with multiple personalities. The character in one area is often very different from another. One size just does not fit all here, and when it comes to signage. So we came up with the idea of signage districts. Additionally, we wanted to ensure that signage regulations are clear, concise, and understandable to all business owners and residents alike. We want to assure that signage is appropriate in terms of its location, its design, and also is very clear to indicate what business is where. At the same time, we want to protect the interests of residents who have signage appropriate in the areas in which it exists. It's very important to align signage regulations with the vision we have for Burlington in the master plan, and to leverage the best practices in other towns to avoid the NIH, or not invented here syndrome. The process was cumbersome, time-intensive, as we conducted extensive research on best practices, both internally and externally. We looked at local towns to see what they did. We talked to people in those towns, whether it be Winchester or Stoneham, Bedford, Chelmsford, Westford. We also talked to the International Signage Association and consultants there who attended some of our meetings. We partnered with the building department and ZBA to understand the issues that they face. The planning department as well was terrific in terms of providing resources to us, such as a planner's dictionary for industry standard definitions as we had to develop them, and then other documents. Then we decided that we needed to focus our efforts, again, the manageable chunk theory, and to start with the town center overlay. Other areas will follow at a different time. So we're not going to be talking about any other part of town tonight. We're just talking about the town center district, which we have developed. And we developed a zoning map, creation of signage district bylaws with updated definitions in the use table, and created a district guide, which is we learned from the different towns we talked to, is an invaluable tool, not only for businesses, but also for residents, which goes through everything from what the process is to what the designs are, et cetera. This approach has the support of the ZBA, the Planning Department, Building Inspector, and Town Council. The work was a result of the efforts of many people, and I'm not going to read all these names, but it certainly has been an inclusive process led by Sally, who has the patience personified through this whole process. And then we had representatives from ZBRC, the Building Department, Planning Department, the ZBA, both past and present. Additionally, we consulted with other experts representing legal, economic development, planning, as well as the International Science Association, as I mentioned, and the Chamber of Commerce. And then we consulted with local business owners and prior signage committee members as well. Obviously, this is a talented and knowledgeable group. However, the committee realized that we now need professional assistance with deep signage, industry, and zoning bylaw expertise to affirm our strategy to create different signage districts in the town. Each signage district, where each signage district could conceivably have different parameters. And to be sure that our town center signage regulations, in terms of sign type, scale, dimension, et cetera, are appropriate and legal, and refine our work where appropriate. In a nutshell, we need experts to bring this thing home. Although we know we will have to go through a formal bid process at some point, should this be approved, the scope of this consulting project was developed and by the committee and sent to 2 urban design organizations that were presented to us by Melissa in Economic Development, so that we could have a realistic number for this request. What we asked them to do is provide a proposal with cost timeframes. Secondly, so that we have a context, we asked them to review the Burlington Master Plan, Town Center Overlay, Design Rules and Regs, and the Town Center Guidelines. Once they are grounded in what it is that Burlington is trying to do, they can review the documents, the overlay map, the drafts that we put together. We thought it was really important that they tap into the community and conduct 2 listening sessions with the business community, and given the hours and the difficulty in getting people to their time through Zoom meetings, we thought 2 would be appropriate, and then also to conduct one for the community. As this is a zoning change and not a general bylaw change, which is something this is a lesson I learned since I've been on ZBRC, is that these rules don't go into effect right away. You have to have some sort of major change to your building in order for it to be effective. So if this is if we come up with a regulation and if the body passes it in the future, there's no requirement for immediate compliance. But we know that other towns and other places have probably done something creative to incent early adoption. And we'd like to learn from that and jumpstart that and have that be part of the process, and the consultants are the ones to tell us what that might be. And then obviously they'll provide us a report at the end of this project. And of course, and then the committee would take it from there. I have no idea what just happened there, but that's with the slides. But so what do we need from you? So you can ignore the slides. We'll just talk about that for a moment. So we are really close to making this happen. We just need take the final step. So what we need from you are your questions, approval of the proposed budget of $40,000, and improved. We're going to start as soon as we possibly can. The final proposal we would like to have ready for the January 2025 town meeting. And as John mentioned, there is more kind of late-breaking news, if you will, in that we have found that this is the kind of project that we can qualify for a state grant under the Mass Downtown Initiative, and there are a lot more words around that. But the last we heard, we said that this is the kind of project that they'd like us to apply for. The grant would be $25,000 if we were lucky enough to get it, and which obviously would cover a pretty major chunk of this, but we can't rely on it. So we need to move forward and ask you to vote on this request. So thank you for your time, and I'm sorry for repeating what John said, but we would, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Questions from the body? Mr. Hartley?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Hartling, Precinct 3. Couple of different, 3 questions. Is it 40 or 45? I heard you mention the master plan multiple times. I don't know that the master plan ever got finished. I know it got paid for. I don't know if it was finished. I think the number was around 100 and a half, 150 grand. I'd like to know if it was finished. Also, I would like to know if this passes, who's going to make sure that the consultant finishes the work? Last question, can we make this contingent on getting the grant?
I can answer some of those. Let's see if I can remember them first, though. It is $40,000. That is the number that we're looking for. The master plan is actually posted on the town website. I think it's in the planning department section. So feel free to take a look at that. It's there. Liz, I'm going to let you speak to that.
Liz, if you could, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The master plan was completed, I think, about 2 years ago, and it was approved by the planning board. So there is a completed document on our website, and we encourage everybody to read it.
And the last part of your question is, can we make this contingent on the $25,000? The way the warrant is printed, and I'm sure the council will tell me if I'm wrong about this, but we're voting on the $40,000. If the grant comes through, then we won't use it. But that's the vote that's before you today. In terms of managing this project, the ZBRC Signage Committee is, we're the group. So Sherry, myself, Sally, and others are going to be managing this project. If you take a look at the group that we have on this committee, we have people who have extensive experience in project management in corporations, myself included. So I'm not shy about holding people accountable to a number. As a practical matter, the groups that we've talked to so far are used to working with municipalities, and they know that if we have an approved number, it will not, they can't go above it. So we will manage both to the timeline as well as to the number. Hope that answered your question.
Further questions? Ms. Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the speaker. Just to refresh my memory, I think the town center is Cambridge Street from the high school to the end with the Billerica border. That's what I think the town center is, but maybe if you could clarify that.
Liz is right there, and you get a microphone. Oh, okay.
So just clarification on the town center, it doesn't go all the way to Billerica. It does start just at the end of the high school, and I believe it goes all the way up until Town Liquors, I believe is kind of, that is the end of the town center. So it does not go all the way into Billerica.
Further questions from the body? Mr. DeBona?
Hi, Jeff DeBona, Precinct 3. I'm also the current chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So this is something that's been worked on for a little while. The Zoning Board actually hasn't done anything on it with the committee in a little while, but I wanted to give a few pieces of information to help people make their decision of how we're doing things. So there's a lot of pre-existing non-conforming signage So it's my understanding it wouldn't change anything that is currently there. It would change stuff going forward. Another thing is, we have covenants on a lot of the buildings in town. When we decide on signage, we say, no other signs, even if by right. So it triggers a Board of Appeals hearing no matter what. It's a practice that started well before my time on the board, and it was to get eyes on signage because we don't have really concise signage bylaws. So, you know, a vote for this would be a step in the right direction, so I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeBona. Further comments from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hughes, and the ZBRC for their work on this. Brings us to Article 24, School Community Custodial Services. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee that the town vote to transfer from free cash $51,611 to be expended under the direction of the Burlington School Committee for the purpose of community custodial fees to fund events which are not school events in order to cover Burlington Scout organizations, PTO meetings, boosters, citations, youth basketball, youth volleyball, youth baseball association, Pop Warner, hockey, soccer, and skating associations, and other not-for-profit Burlington civic organizations. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is an article that we have every year, and it's to fund the custodial services for school use by various nonprofit civic organizations such as Scouts, PTO, boosters, sports, and so on. There's a detailed list of how the number was derived in the backup if you want to look at that. It's a great way to encourage these generally youth-oriented programs, which we think is a great way to keep our youth involved in things. So Ways and Means support is 12-0.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. Capital budget voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. School Committee. Dr. Conti, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. School Committee was 5-0.
Thank you. Questions on this article? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 25. Yes. Okay. All right. Article 25, Marshall Simons Middle School field renovations. Been moved and seconded. Mr. Davidson, you have an issue?
Doug Davison, Precinct 2. I was wondering if we could move to postpone to a time certain Monday for this article. I think we've got well more than the allotted time to discuss it. Could we move through the process and come back to this on Monday?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to do that but, well, if you guys want to do it. It's 10 o'clock. I'm just trying to have people.
That's fair enough. It's a decision of the body. Does the body wish to postpone this to a time certain? We'll do it the first thing on next Monday. Or do you want to deal with it now? All right, so if you want to postpone it vote yes. Okay, so all in favor of postponing? Thank you. All opposed to postponing? I think the motion fails. And we will move forward with this article. Okay. Been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to see if the town will appropriate $6,720,000 for the purpose of repairing, replacing, and renovating the athletic fields at the Marshall Simons Middle School, same to be spent under the direction of the school department, including the payment of all incidental and related costs to pay for said appropriation. The treasurer, with the approval of the select board, be authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or other enabling authority, said amount to be expended under the direction of the select board. Now, I have an amendment to this. Which seeks to change the funding source from borrowed to free cash. Let me read the whole thing so we're correct here. To see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $6,720,000 from free cash for the purpose of preparing, replacing, and renovating the athletic fields at the Marshall Simons Middle School to be spent under the direction of the school department, or to act in any other manner in relation thereto. Mr. Eiler, please.
So we're just speaking on the amendment right now, I assume, right? Or the motion for the amendment?
Is there a second on the amendment? All right. So yes, now we are discussing on the amendment.
Right. Okay, so just talking about the amendment right now. So the administration in Ways and Means, as Paul had mentioned a while ago, spends quite a bit of time thinking about free cash and how to spend it and the best way to utilize it for debt and so forth. We specifically did not suggest using this for free cash. If you look at the free cash analysis, we had $32.5 million coming in October. At January town meeting, we appropriated $1.7 million of that. And at this town meeting, we spent an additional $14 million of that. So that leaves unallocated free cash to carry into FY25 of $16.7 million. The intent, as Mr. Sagarino mentioned, is to utilize that in the most effective way to keep our debt down, but also to carry a substantial balance, because one of the things that the debt rating agencies do look at is our reserves, and free cash is considered part of that. Proposal to spend $6.7 million in free cash for this article is probably about the most irresponsible thing that you could do. It's using up almost half of that free cash for this one article. So I strongly recommend that you do not go with this amendment. It's a really bad idea to suck down this much free cash all at once.
Mr. Parsons.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Ed Parsons, Precinct 6, Ways and Means Committee. I am very prepared to give an argument for the minority that voted in favor of the article funded by debt. I cannot make that argument for free cash.
Okay. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this? I see that. Is there any board to speak in favor of this at this time? Or am I opening it up to the discussion from the... All right, Mr. Sinesi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a question. So on Monday night, we were given a number of $11 million in stabilization. Does that count towards our total in reserves that the bond rating agencies look at?
Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, it does.
Mr. Giannino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As a follow-up, if you're going to take something from stabilization, it takes a 2/3 vote. And as Mr. Eiler talked about, we spent an awful lot of time, I know John, Paul, Ways and Means, and myself, and a group of other people talking about how to use free cash, how to move forward with trying to be looking at the infrastructure in bonding as necessary and utilizing that free cash. This is a surprise. And I would, as a resident of this town, I would highly hope that you do not vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giannino, who is also our town treasurer. Ms. Lohr.
Can you explain why...
Excuse me, please identify yourself.
I'm sorry,
Thank
Sharon Laurie, Precinct 3. Can you explain why you chose this amendment? What was the rationale behind pulling the free cash?
Who's the sponsor of the amendment? Mr. Dan DiTucci Jr. Mr. DiTucci, please. You need to argue in favor of your amendment.
Yes, I'll argue in favor of my amendment. Dan DiTucci Jr., Precinct 6. So we had discussion of this article Monday night by the school committee. It was voted down 3-2. And then in my tenure on town meeting, I've never received more emails or calls related to an article that was voted down. So last night it was miraculously supported 5-0. And there was discussion in the school committee about possibly financing this with out of cash, given that we were looking to bond so many items. And if that's not feasible, I get it. We will go forward as stated in Article 25. Thank you.
Could the school committee please clarify their vote? I believe I've heard a different number. Mrs. Monaco?
The vote was rescinded last night on a 3-2 vote. I changed my vote so that the article could come to town meeting, but it was a 3-2, not a 5-0.
Thank you, Mrs. Monaco. Question, again, we're just discussing the funding source. Ms. Waring.
Chris Warren, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Warren, Precinct 4. My question is, if we were to bond it, what would be the timeline for it? If people are concerned about our reserves, to me, we've approved a $200 million operating budget, a $46 million police station, $14 million in other capital items. Another $6 or $7 million doesn't seem that big to me right now. Thanks.
Mr. Eiler, please.
I hate to say it, $1 million here, $1 million there, pretty soon it's real money. But yeah, I mean, this is the road to madness is, just because we spent $10 million here, let's spend another $10 million somewhere else, and eventually your budget's totally out of control. So I think the point is, and I'll get into more, we're still talking about just the amendment.
We're just talking about the
So I'll
amendment.
talk more about this when we get to the actual, hopefully unamended thing. But the point is, in general, we spend a lot of time creating a plan on what kind of budget is sustainable, what kind of levy people think is sustainable, what sort of free cash spending is financially prudent so that we have good reserves and so that we're investing where we think we should. This was not on our capital plan whatsoever. So this is a $6.7 million, I'll call it a whammy, that was thrown into the process that was not accounted for. And so, yeah, if you want to go ahead and just spend money because it seems like something that feels good right now, because what's another $6.7 million, great, go ahead. But it's not but when people complain to you about, you think you got a lot of letters about field conditions, and I did get a lot of those emails today. How many emails do you think you're going to get when your taxes go up because we just keep spending money without even following a plan? So that's really the point here, is that if you don't pay attention to each item, pretty soon it gets to be a very large number that people aren't going to be happy with.
Ms. Wang?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Zi Wang from Prison 5. Is that possible that this is break into two phases, like 3 years? I mean, like it's a 2 years project anyway. So $3 million this year, $3 million next year from free cash? Or is it impossible? Oh, just wondering.
Yes, woman up here, please. Well, I'll get to them. I haven't forgotten them. Some other people have hands raised, too.
Thank you, Moderator. Jamie Greitzer, Precinct 1. Given the sensitive nature of this article, I'm very, very new. This is like my second day, and I got about 50 emails today from my neighbors. What's the plan if this doesn't pass? I'm actually not in favor of it, but I want to have answers for my neighbors regarding, you know, what the plan is going forward for these fields.
Well, we're not to the point of that decision yet. We're still arguing of not whether we're going to do it or not, but how we're going to pay for it. So that's the only issue we have on the table, is how we're going to pay. Mr. Rutfield.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alex Rutfield, Precinct 5. So just to clarify, free cash and bonding are only two options for paying for this if we do it. And is it common to typically do a seven-figure expenditures through bonding? Is that the usual way we handle these?
Mr. Pierce, excuse me, I had another issue here. Is there a question, something to be answered? Or are we good? All right. Mr. Eiler.
Okay. Hopefully I make sure I understand the question here. I think there's actually three options. Well, actually, four. So if you look at the article here, the most common options would be that we're either going to use free cash or we would borrow the money to pay for it. There are other options listed here, which we could raise and appropriate, which basically means raise your taxes to pay for it, or transfer from available funds is listed, which would be if we could somehow find some other appropriate fund, which I don't think there is. We could transfer from that. So effectively borrowing or free cash are the realistic options.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Mr. Pearson, if you have a question online, please unmute so we can hear you.
There, am I going through? I'm speaking because I wanted to point out that there was something missing in the presentation about the choices that we're making when we start spending large amounts of money. And it should be considered we're doing the 6.7 million, but also for other things, which is that the consequence of spending 45 million on a police station and 60 million on an elementary school is that the capital budget shows that we are not going to do any work on the high school for another 10 years. And we probably won't do any work on the other elementary school for another 15 years. So I think that people need to kind of remember that we're not only making decisions about what we could spend money on when Mr. Eiler made his presentation, but he didn't mention that also being decided is that the high school will not be renovated in the near future, and Pine Glen will not be renovated for till the distant future. And Pine Glen is in just as much need of renovations as other elementary schools are. So I think that specifically we shouldn't be using free cash for doing this field amendment, and we should be using borrowing, because that borrowing means that we can spread out the amount of money that at any particular year that's spent. It's a multi-year project, and so there's no reason to pull a bunch of cash out right at this moment. It can be spent over like 3 years. It's a multi-phase project. It can be easily done in 3 years. So I oppose using it from free cash and support bonding it.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mr. Murphy. There's been a motion to move the question on the amendment. So we're voting on, first, whether we should move the question. All those in favor of moving the question? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries. So now we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. All those opposed to the amendment? All right. The amendment fails. So now we are back to the original motion to see if we will do this by borrowing the $6.7 million. Now let's go through this process. Mr. Eiler, please, on borrowing the money for this project, the vote of Ways and Means.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just start off saying that Ways and Means opposed this 4-8. Have a little bit of discussion to go along with this, as you might imagine. Excuse me? Yeah, 8 opposed, 4. So we voted to oppose spending this money for this. So the way these things typically work is, and have worked, is that the various departments work with administration and Ways and Means to propose things that are necessary or highly desirable, while fitting in with a responsible short and long-term budget plan. And so, not surprisingly, as a result of that process, you've noticed that Ways and Means usually votes in support of these initiatives. Unfortunately, this isn't the case in this particular this particular item. And therefore, Ways and Means took the extremely rare position of voting against this. In fact, you'll notice it's the only thing we have voted against in all the things proposed tonight. So hopefully you'll take that to heart. So let me get into a few details here. This is really two projects in one that are being proposed. They happen to be on the same site at the middle school, but they're two separate fields. So there's the near or the upper field, that's a turf field, where $1.95 million is proposed to repair and replace that turf field and the running track and the track and field area. And then there's $4.77 million, which is in the further lower grass field, to convert that far grass field to turf, replace the lighting, add bleachers, scoreboards, so forth. So Ways and Means discussed this quite a bit, and I think there's a general thought that yes, these would be nice things to have, no doubt about it. But we had a lot of concerns. So one, on the current turf field, the testing to date does not show that there's an immediate issue requiring replacement on this. There is another testing coming up, and we do know that it's approaching end of life, but it's not a situation where this is failing the current testing as we had seen at the high school field here, for instance. There's no economies of scale that are seen in the quotes that are being proposed here. Or in other words, there's no particular reason why these two projects need to be done together, other than they happen to be at the same site. So one of the things you'll see is that there's a $75,000 mobilization fee for each of the two projects. There's a $100,000 and a $150,000, erosion control and temporary things for the site. So there's no real economies of scale there. There seem to be a number of opportunities for cost reduction that we could go through, certainly. But in practice, I'd say the single most important issue that we had with this is that there currently is no overall field capital spending plan in place for the town. So there's a whole bunch of fields, some of which are controlled by the school department, some of which are controlled by rec. We would like to see that these things are all put together and a spending plan is put in place for them so that we can actually budget for them and have a plan in place for how to fund these things. In the past, our costs for these things were low enough that a project for $1 million or $2 million might come in. It could fit into the budget reasonably well. We'd find a way to make it work out. $6.7 million is just a whole nother category that we're talking about. So the previous, what I'll call light planning that we did is no longer adequate. We require a real substantive plan. If you look at all the vehicle replacement we do for DPW, for other departments, you'll see it in the capital plan. It's spelled out how much we're spending each year on that. So we can plan for that kind of thing. This is a whole nother level of spending relative to that. So what would be different if we waited to deal with this and do it, what I'll say, properly? Some of the things we'll know is we'll know the results of the town meeting and debt exclusion votes for our large projects, for Police Station and Fox Hill, our immediate large projects. There's a field study currently that the schools have completed, but there is no field study yet for the rec fields. That's coming up. That will be completed so that those can be combined together. And I'll point out the field study is not a capital spending plan. If you read through those several hundred-page documents, It's a combination of things that could be considered needs and things that could be considered wants. We would need to go through those and decide which of the wants are actually really important, come up with the prices for all this stuff, and then on top of that, we need to factor in what the maintenance costs associated with these things are. Just as a very quick example, if a turf field of this size is, I think initially it's 2.8 or something million, but let's just say it's 2 million to redo it every 10 years. So that comes out to a $200,000 annual cost associated with that would need to be factored into a capital spending plan. We don't have that worked out right now. So something that we would do once those field studies are done would be would have an actual capital spending plan across all the fields. We would decide collectively what is an appropriate amount to spend each year for our fields. Something that we would also consider in such a plan is potentially phasing these things. So, for instance, as I mentioned, this is really two separate projects. They don't have to be done at the same time. So that would be something that could be phased in. We could look at potential cost reductions. We could look at potential other things in the project that could also be phased in. So the real issue here is that doing a $6.7 million project without having an actual documented plan of what we're doing with our fields in town and just deciding, let's do this one because I got 50 emails about how people are unhappy with the fields. And I accept that there is some real issue there to be addressed. But the right way to address it isn't to say, because a lot of people are complaining about this, let's put it at the front of the list. Let's actually have a plan. In general, what we're trying to do with the financial team and with Ways and Means is plan, then execute. The wrong order is execute and then get around to having a plan as to how you're going to do it. So, for instance, if we look at this $6.7 million, just to put it in perspective, this alone would be a $22 tax increase on our median household. And in terms of our annual budget, this would be adding about $480,000 every year to our budget for the next 25 years, just to finance this one project. We can't just be throwing in roughly $500,000 items into our budget without prior planning. So we're not saying never do this. We're saying have a plan first, get buy-in, and then execute it, not the other way around. So I'd like to just reiterate, Ways and Means voted against this 4-8-0. Because there was a significant minority of 4 that was in favor of this plan, I'd like to ask your permission to have Ed Parsons speak to the minority position. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Parsons, please.
Thank you, John, and thank you, moderator. This may surprise you, but I agree with everything that John just said. A minority of Ways and Means was willing to make an exception in this particular case. I think everyone on the committee agreed with the merits of the project and saw it as worthy of funding at some point. And I think everyone recognized that there were some financial difficulties in supporting this project in this year at this time. I talked with those members, the 4 of us that voted in favor. We all pointed to the merits. The merits of the project are first that this is a clear and long-standing community priority. We hear about the fields every year. It's supported by 2 departments, recreation and the schools. We know that thousands of our residents use the fields. And we know that there's a demonstrable need for a greater proportion of them to be turf fields. We have teams that get kicked off the turf fields because there isn't enough capacity, and we have many kids who are out after dark, in the rain, on the varsity field because late at night is the only time that they can practice because a lot of our grass fields are mushy. We like the expansion of equity and access in the plan, which is going to allow more kids who aren't on the varsity teams or their parents to use the fields. And there are access walkways and access ramps that increase the ability of more of our residents to use the fields. Ways and Means is very justifiably concerned about adding another large debt-funded project while we've put in a lot of effort, which I can vouch for, in trying to manage 2 building projects, the prospects for more. And this was incremental to all that work that we've done. It did come later than other plans. We would like to see that on a capital plan, and it hasn't been. But in the end, we have to balance careful planning with getting moving on some capital projects. Part of the reason why we're in this bind where we have many capital needs to consider at once is hesitation in the past. And so we fell on the side of that in this case, given that we hear about the fields all the time and we think the community needs this. Funded with debt, it allows us to push the payments forward, defray some of that with free cash as it's available and as we choose to. And I think because we anticipate seeing this project come up next year if we don't fund it this year, the real most substantive impact of delaying it by a year is 1 year less of use by kids who could use it in the coming year.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Capital budget. Mr. Woods, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Woods, Precinct 7. Capital budget voted 1 in favor, 4 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. School committee. Mrs. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Monaco, School Committee. The school committee voted 5-0 in favor of this, initially with enthusiasm. We love the project. We want the project. We sent it to Ways and Means, and we went and we took part and listened. And after the discussion at Ways and Means and the vote from both Ways and Means and Capital Budget, we began to feel that maybe we were asking for more than we should be asking for at the moment, because we do have Fox Hill School coming up, and that is clearly the top priority of the school committee. So we didn't have a full school committee meeting. We didn't meet with Ways and Means till May 1st. For the second time, they had questions when we met with them before. But we always have a small school committee meeting right before the start of town meeting, because if we've made a mistake or we need to withdraw something or whatever, then we have that meeting set up. So we had that meeting Monday night, and we took a vote, which frankly I expected would be unanimous. But it turned out to be a 3-2 vote to postpone this project until no later than next May town meeting. And to be really honest, no one had approached me at that point about this project. I had heard nothing. So all of a sudden, right after we took that vote to postpone until no later than next May, everyone got upset. And frankly, 2 of my committee members, Mrs. Masato and Mr. Brooks, who voted against postponing, they were very upset, and so were a lot of other people, because they felt that town meeting should make this decision and that we shouldn't have postponed it. So last night at our regular school committee meeting, I asked if anyone wanted to make a motion to rescind the vote to postpone, And a motion was made, and a discussion took place, and the vote was 3-2 to rescind the motion. I changed my vote from postponing to rescind the motion because I felt that I had heard from so many people. I wanted them to have the opportunity to bring this to town meeting and let town meeting decide. Just one comment on the project. It is a great project. I do think that breaking it up is a possibility. The backfield is in tough shape. It looks like it did when my kids went to school, and that wasn't recent. I think the turf field and the track still look pretty good, and from what you'll hear from Dr. Conti and Mr. Cuna, I think they still have some life in them. But the backfield, it's not a pretty field. I mean, you can use it, but it's not great. And I would love to see that fixed as soon as it's possible. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mrs. Monaco. I believe that Ms. Massardo wishes to present the school committee's rationale for moving this project forward.
I'm waiting. Okay, here we go. Good evening. Melissa Massardo from the school committee. Both the school committee and the recreation committee approved this article originally unanimously. While the school department put this forth, since it's on our property, we feel that this is truly a community project to benefit all members of the town. This was the second identified priority from our joint school and rec field study completed in 2022, the first being the Francis Wyman baseball fields that have already been completed. While I can appreciate the Ways and Means position that this is an expensive project and that we have other expensive projects on the horizon, I believe that we are in the best position to support this project this year. Realistically, the cheapest time to invest was yesterday. This project doesn't get any cheaper by putting it off for a year. It feels tempting, but we will continue to need investment in this town, and there will be other capital projects next year. We have spent decades putting off large projects for tomorrow, and we cannot continue this pattern if we want to improve this town for our families. Breaking it into pieces does not make it less expensive and will simply serve to make the project take longer. I'm asking for your support on this project so that we can invest in the necessary infrastructure that this town desperately needs. This project will increase field capacity by adding much needed usable field hours so our young children are on allocated field time at 9 p.m. The project will finally make the fields ADA accessible to students and emergency vehicles, a capital budget request that has been deprioritized for many years. It is widely supported in this community, as I imagine many of you found out this week. Thank you for all of your time, and Jeremy will go into more details about the specifics of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeremy Brooks, School Committee. Some of the merits of the project have already been stated, so I'm not going to restate the obvious. Of note, the ADA accessibility is a big improvement to that field. It additionally gives us the ability to have one additional girls lacrosse field, 2 boys lacrosse fields, 2 field hockey fields, 2 soccer fields, seat walls, portable bleachers, new lighting that supports play on all those fields throughout the time scheduled, track repairs, and then new shot put areas, new discus areas, new javelin area, and other general site improvements. What wasn't captured there too is the usage really in depth. So you have 3 sports at 3 levels. So you have field hockey, soccer, lacrosse, having JV varsity freshmen practicing every day down there. So you have about 500 to 600 kids using that field per week. Add on top of that, you use sports with another couple hundred kids using it per week. Then recreation activities on the weekends. You're looking at throughput of that place, about 1,000 kids a week utilizing that space. I understand the cost is very large. I sympathize with that fact, and I'm not trying to discredit anyone's work on Ways and Means or on capital budget. I feel like we need to prioritize these infrastructure projects because they're only going to get tougher to pursue. Additionally, we just need to have that conversation with all the stakeholders in the room to understand what the proper scope is, what the right project looks like, and I think like we have it here. So I would ask for your support in this measure. And again, it is a large expenditure, but we're also servicing a large portion of our town's population by approving this and letting those kids, letting the adults, and letting other sports have the ability to conduct activities in a state-of-the-art facility that's quite frankly needed because we can't use over a third of that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Dr. Conti and Mr. Kuna, are you presenting on the actual project now? You're not? Okay. So now we will open it up to the body for discussion. Mr. Murphy.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Chris Murphy, Precinct 5. So Christine obviously opened the door to splitting this up. What I'd like to know is, you know, how viable is it to pass on the renovation of the existing track and turf field and just build the new one now, and how long would we have to put that off for? Do you guys hate that idea? Is that a viable way to do this? If it would shop the price significantly, that would help, I think, quite a bit getting this thing through. So if we could hear a little bit more around those options, that'd be good.
Mr. Kuna, please.
Thank you to the moderator. Ultimately, as far as splitting it up, I think this body is here to decide that, right? And it's definitely a choice that we would support. The current field is 11 years old right now, and it's not end of life. We do have the impact testing to support that, but what we are is on a year-to-year basis. Typically, turf fields do have about a 10-year lifespan, and depending on use, that will be diminished to less than 10 years. Again, through COVID, we did see some minimized play on that field, also on varsity fields, so we were able to extend that. But based on the impact testing, again, year to year, that does not mean in 3 months it's going to be bad. It could possibly mean we get 1 year, 2 years, 3 years out of that. That being said, you know, as Mr. Isla mentioned, you know, it doesn't show any economy of scale on the quotes, but at the same exact time, having the field under construction, if we were to break it up, what happens is we can shut down the backfield, then turn around and shut down the front field with the same companies potentially, and that'll minimize the disruption on the field. If we then want to turn around and separate, let's say, the lights out of it and come back 2 years from now and then put the field back under construction again, then we lose playing time on the field. So ultimately, the package in front of you could be split up based on your votes, your decisions. But I think minimizing the downtime on the field, maximizing getting the project up and running, and then playability on it is what's presented in front of you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kuna. Yes, ma'am, here. Down here, over here, please, microphone.
Mimi Bix Highland, Precinct 1. So this is a warrant article that I have been following because I hear from residents in my precinct who very much want this to be endorsed. My own husband is a soccer coach, and I am familiar with the condition of many of the fields in town, and they are all quite poor, and there are issues. However, I also listen to the arguments put forward by Ways and Means, and I am somebody who does think having a plan before execution is generally a good thing. So I have been torn. And then this week, this issue became quite explosive after certain comments were put on social media. And I've been watching the school committee meeting, and something was said yesterday that really caught my attention. One of the members said, quote, "I heard Dr. Purchase mention today that this is a #1 priority for the middle school because it includes accessibility for the students," end quote. And then Mr. Parsons also went down that road and said this is an equity issue. So I understand that quality playtime on the fields is a really important issue for so many people raising families in town. But I had not heard this framed or couched as an equity issue until this statement was made at school committee meeting. So I reached out to the school to find out how is this an equity issue, because this is the field that I operate in, and I wanted to understand the thinking behind this. And I learned that from the school's perspective, the issue about accessibility is not what many of the residents, certainly in Precinct 1, are raising alarm about. It's not about making sure kids in wheelchairs can play soccer or softball. It's the fact that the school will often use the field for educational purposes, have outdoor classroom time. And from the school's perspective, having an ADA compliant ramp to the track is what they prioritize or wish for. So I think issues are getting confused here, and I understand the need to kind of legitimize an unpopular position by invoking equity language, but I just want us to be clear. So anyway, after having substantive discussions about this, I went back to the backup to really see how the money is being designated, and to see if the designation of the monies reflect attention to ADA compliant ramp. And what I saw is that, again, the total proposal for the two MSMS fields is $6,720,000. The proposed cost for the update for the current track and field is $1,950,000. The brush field conversion, the brush field conversion to a turf field is $4,770,000. The warrant article references a ramp to brush field, but the ramp cost is combined with new bleachers at $300,000. This combined cost is 6.3% of the brush field part of the proposed article. What part of this 6.3% is for the ramp, and what part is for the bleachers? Does this proposal take into account the design costs and consultation costs to meet specifications of building an ADA-approved ramp from the school down to Brush Field? And how far down to Brush Field? Because what the school wants is ideally to the actual track, not to the field, because the children for whom this is most difficult to access are children in wheelchairs. So I think we need to be, honest about that and not disingenuous when we invoke equity issues. And also, I want to, from the school perspective, when during PE students have accidents and a nurse has to go and attend to a student, right now it's not an ideal situation because of the limited ramp and pavement surfaces. But the school's interests and the residents' interests are not one and the same, and I think it would be more honest to just be frank about what we're talking about here. And I'm saying this with pressure because I have many neighbors in my own community who want me to vote in favor of this, but I would like to get some answers about how much attention is really being paid to building an ADA compliant ramp, and what is the plan for that if I'm going to vote for something like this. Thank you.
Mr. Kuna, please.
Thank you for that question. So I can speak for part of Ms. Purchase's opinions because I've had this conversation with her. It's approximately 1,530 feet to come out of the gym, walk down the driveway, take a right through the whole entire parking lot, get to the end of the gate, and then get to the field. Right in here, this is a proposal, so we don't have the finalized design right now. But what you will see in the proposed drawings is a ramp that has a seating section into it, and then the walkway space. So that's the $300,000 that you mentioned to convert that. There's also some site prep work that has hillside seating, which is not ADA accessible as far as what your conversation is referring to. But in regards to the $300,000 proposed is to get a ramp from the back side of the school on the lower side of the gym, where we do have an elevator from inside the building down to that parking lot. The ramp would get us down to both fields, where it would be met by, not decided yet whether it be concrete or some type of pavement, but an accessible walkway between the two fields.
Go ahead, Beanie. Wait for the microphone, please.
To Mr. Kuna, through the moderator, thank you for that. In the backup, though, it says the $300,000 is to be split with the bleachers, and the bleachers are listed twice in two subsections. So what percentage of that $300,000 is for the ramp, and what percentage is for the bleachers?
Through the moderator.
Go ahead.
The reason it's listed twice is because there's two separate sets of bleachers. So one side is a walkway bleacher that comes from the back side of the building that's accessible from the upper parking lot down to the field. And then there's a different seating area that's proposed, so a different set of fees for the other set. We're calling them bleachers, but if you look through the pictures, it's a natural landscape type of bleacher that has like a rock surface face with some grassed area. So we're proposing more of a natural landscape seating area in addition to a ramp with seatings on it as well.
For the $300K is intended for the ADA compliant ramp?
And the walkway, yes.
Walkway, okay, thank you.
Mr. Glantz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nolan Glantz, Precinct 1. Lots to talk about here. So first of all, you know, John, I appreciate your comments about the cash versus bonding, and was thinking a lot about the earlier comments about our bond rating and for the big bonding projects we have coming up, and wanted to have the overall picture be good. Took a look at some of the numbers and kind of added them up that we've been presented on Monday night and in the various backups. We've got 32,000 of free cash, sorry, 32 million of free cash, spending 14 if we approved everything, separate from, this is not related to that. That leaves 18, 12 million of stabilization is 30, 12 million of unused levy is 42, so we have 42 of reserves right now. One of the things we also look at is how much you've bonded, so that all plays into it. But I think that the reserves, I think, are there. I also looked at the history of free cash. As of 2019, it was 13 million, and it has grown every year to the current total of 32. So it's not like, oh my God, if we get, you know, it's all a question of how much we spend on a given year for various projects. And we are spending a lot of cash this year on projects, whereas normally we would have been bonding them if you look at prior years of how we do things. So I think that picture will even itself out. In terms of the current project, and in terms of your comments about planning, I totally agree with planning. And I think that applies not just to fields, but to all of our infrastructure. A lot of times I hear complaints in this body and out there from the public about, why did we get into this situation? Why did we let things go? And, you know, to be fair, a lot of times once we make a big expenditure here, we all get exhaustion from that and try to recover from that by not spending for a while. And as opposed to these things should be essentially, you know, infrastructure funds every year that we should be spending into as opposed to waiting 10 or 20 years and then getting hit with a big expense. So that project, you can't get away from it, or that reality, you can't get away from it. The infrastructure gets used and eventually needs to get replaced or renovated. So we didn't create this problem now. I think that a lot of this field situation goes on the schools because it's on the school property, but as was mentioned, much of it gets used outside of the schools by community and youth sports, et cetera. So it's really as much rec, in my opinion, as it is schools. Having a plan is good if you don't know what to do, but if you have a really dire need, you start on the need and then you create a plan as well for the rest of it. But the obvious needs, you don't need a plan to tell me that field space is massively short. There's always overbooking, extended hours. We either have to cut back services by not allowing so many programs or add the fields. And I don't think we're talking about cutting back services. So I think adding the field is a no-brainer. It has been discussed, the idea of splitting the project up. And perhaps we should tonight make an amendment to just do the new field and defer the renovation. That would shave $2 million off and change the amount to 4.7. I understand that would take an amendment, but would you guys be, it sounds like you guys would be okay if we did that. Did I hear that right before?
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ms. Clements, yes, I believe the group would be supportive of that. Again, part of the forcing function of having this put onto the floor was to have this very discussion. Obviously, we fell short with Ways and Means. We fell short with capital budget. And to understand where we need to be, we need to have this discussion.
Can I make the motion to amend? Bill?
Sure.
I'd like to amend to remove the renovation and include only the new field, which does include the ADA ramp, by the way. I looked at the kind of separation. It also includes the lighting. So that would be 4.7, I don't have the exact number on my head, but it would amend the amount to do the new field in the back and to defer the renovation of the front field. So we'll have to get it in writing, I think, in order to actually, right?
Okay, I need this in writing, please.
Yes. How do I write it down?
The amount would be that, $4,770,000.
All right.
Probably do it on here.
So is somebody getting me this in writing, please? Mr. Hartling, do you have a procedural question?
He doesn't appear to be writing it down. He's got it on the tablet. I got a tablet.
We have an amendment pending. We have to deal with the amendment. Jeez. You should have listened. Hey, Doug? 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 We should have listened to you. I don't control that. It's out of order, I'm sorry.
First, we have to take care of the amendment.
Mr. Glantz has the floor with his amendment. We have to deal with it first before I can deal with a motion to adjourn or anything else.
There's his motion.
If you wish to withdraw, then we can... Yes. Mr. Glantz, would you like to withdraw this until Monday? Yes. All right, the motion has been withdrawn. I've heard the motion to adjourn. There's nothing on the floor at the moment. The amendment's been withdrawn. Nobody has the floor at the moment. Unless town council tells me I'm wrong. It's 11 o'clock. People are leaving. I think it's for the benefit of all and for the benefit of proper discussion on this convoluted project that we adjourn and we try this again on Monday.
Have a motion to adjourn. So you need a motion, you need a vote.
We have a motion to adjourn. So if we adjourn, then we pick up where we left off.
So take a vote on the motion.
So we have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We'll see you on Monday.